Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Unexplained Diaries. Here on this channel, I share real life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. I was driving home later than usual because my shift ran long and I missed the last bus. It was close to midnight, maybe a little after. I took the back highway the way I always did, the one that cut through fields and patches of woods before looping back toward town. I'd driven it so many times I barely had to think about it. The night was clear and dry, no rain, no fog. The sky was dark but not completely black, with a thin wash of stars overhead. The road ahead was empty, just my headlights stretching out over the asphalt. The radio was on low, some talk show I wasn't really listening to. I remember feeling tired in that deep, dull way where your body keeps going, but your thoughts lag a second behind. I rolled the window down a bit to keep myself alert. Cool air rushed in, carrying the smell of cut grass and dirt. A mile or two outside of town, the road dipped slightly and curved left. There was a stretch there with no streetlights at all. Normally it was pitch dark except for my headlights and the reflective paint on the road. That was when everything brightened, not like headlights behind me, not like lightning. The road ahead lit up evenly, all at once, as if a soft white light had switched on somewhere above my car. It didn't glare or cast sharp shadows, it just filled the space. The asphalt looked pale, almost chalky. The trees along the sides of the road showed up in detail I couldn't normally see at night. Individual branches, leaves, the texture of the bark. Even the hood of my car looked different, flatter, like it was being lit from straight overhead instead of from the front. I instinctively lifted my foot off the gas. My first thought was that a helicopter had to be overhead. Maybe a search or something. I glanced up through the windshield, squinting. I didn't see anything. No lights, no shape, no sound of rotors. The radio kept playing, uninterrupted. The light held steady for maybe 2 seconds, long enough for me to register that it wasn't moving and wasn't coming from any direction I could identify. Then it faded, not abruptly. It dimmed smoothly like a dimmer switch being turned down. The road returned to the familiar tunnel of my headlights, the trees melting back into shadow. My heart was pounding harder than it should have been. I told myself it was probably someone with a spotlight in a field nearby. Farmers did weird stuff at night sometimes, or maybe a plane with some unusual lighting angle. I pressed the gas and kept going. A few minutes later, I noticed something felt off. The curve in the road straightened out, and I expected to see the old grain silo on the right. It was a local landmark, tall and pale, with a faded logo on the side. You could spot it from a distance, even at night. But the road ahead was empty. No silo. I slowed down, confused, scanning the darkness. The fields looked the same. The fence lines were where they should be. But the silo was behind me. I checked the rearview mirror and saw it shrinking in the distance, already farther back than made sense. I hadn't remembered passing it. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, tires crunching loudly in the quiet. I put the car in park and sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel. I tried to replay the last few minutes in my head, leaving the curve, the light, the fading, driving on. There was just nothing. A blank stretch where the silo should have been. I checked the clock on the dashboard. It read 12:47 a.m. That was wrong. I'd glanced at my phone just before getting in the car. It had been 12:38. Even accounting for the drive, I should have been closer to 12:43 or 12:44 at most. I unlocked my phone and checked it. 12:47 a.m., same as the dashboard. I sat there longer than I meant to, listening to the engine idle and the faint buzz of insects in the grass. The night felt unusually still, like it was holding its breath. Eventually, I told myself I was overtired and spooking myself. Memory slips happened. Time felt weird when you were exhausted. I drove the rest of the way home without incident. But I couldn't shake the sense that I'd skipped over something important. That night, I slept badly. I kept dreaming of driving through bright, empty spaces where the road went on forever and nothing moved. The next day, I mentioned it to my sister Maya when she called. I tried to keep it casual. Ever zone out so hard you miss something obvious? I asked. All the time, she said. Why? I think I skipped past the silo on County Road without noticing. She laughed. That thing's impossible to miss. I know, I said. That's what freaks me out. She suggested I was just tired and needed a day off. I agreed, even though it didn't really help. I drove that same route again a few nights later, deliberately this time. Same hour, same conditions. Nothing happened. No strange light, no missing time. I passed the silo and made a point of saying it out loud as I went by, like that would anchor it in place. A week went by, then it happened again. This time I was coming home earlier, around 10:30 p.m. The sky was overcast, low clouds reflecting the glow of the town behind me. The road was damp from rain earlier in the evening, though it wasn't raining anymore. I was halfway through the dark stretch when the road brightened. Same light, same even glow. It reflected off the wet asphalt, making it look like polished stone. The trees lit up again, too clearly, too evenly. I slowed almost to a crawl. I rolled the window down all the way and leaned slightly out, looking up. Still nothing. No sound. No wind. The rain-slick road didn't reflect any visible source. This time I felt pressure in my ears, like descending in an airplane. My stomach fluttered unpleasantly. The light faded again. I stayed stopped for a few seconds after it was gone, breathing slowly, trying not to panic. When I started driving again, my hands were shaking. I passed the silo a minute later. I watched it the entire time, unwilling to look away. When I got home, I checked the clock immediately. It was 6 minutes later than I expected. Not as much as the first time, but enough to notice. Over the next month, the light appeared 2 more times, always on that same stretch of road, always brief, always silent. Each time I lost a few minutes, 3 minutes once, 5 another. I never remembered passing the silo when the light showed up. It was like that part of the drive just didn't stick. I tried recording the drive with my phone once, propped on the dashboard. When I checked the video later, the footage jumped slightly during the stretch where the light should have been. Just a small skip, like dropped frames. The timestamps jumped forward by 4 minutes. There was no visible light in the recording. Eventually, I started taking a different route home, even though it added 20 minutes to my commute. I didn't like the feeling that came with that road anymore. It felt watched in a way I couldn't explain. Sometimes, though, when I drive past the turnoff for the old highway, I feel that same dull pressure in my ears. And for just a moment, the sky ahead looks a little brighter than it should. I keep my eyes on the road and don't slow down. I was lying on my back in bed, staring at nothing, trying to fall asleep. It was close to 1 a.m. I remember checking my phone and thinking I should have been asleep hours ago. Work in the morning, same routine, nothing special about the day. The house was quiet in the normal way, refrigerator humming faintly, the occasional tick from the cooling pipes. My dog, Cooper, asleep on the floor at the foot of the bed, breathing slow and steady. That was when I noticed the light. At first, I thought a car was passing outside, headlights sweeping across the room, but it didn't move like headlights. It wasn't a streak or a flash. It was more like a soft brightness pressing gently against my closed eyelids. Not bright enough to hurt, not sharp, just there. It pulsed once, faded, then came back. I opened my eyes. The room was completely dark, no light from the window, no glow from the street lamp outside. The digital clock on my nightstand was dark too, which was weird because it always stayed on. I stared at it for a second, confused, then realized I could still see the numbers faintly. They just weren't lit. Moonlight, maybe? Or my eyes adjusting. I closed my eyes again. The glow returned immediately. It wasn't coming from any direction I could place. It felt like it was everywhere at once, even behind my head. The pulse was slow and steady, almost rhythmic, like breathing. My heart started beating faster. I told myself I was half asleep, hypnagogic hallucinations. I'd read about that stuff before. I opened my eyes again and sat up. The glow vanished instantly. The room was dark and normal again, but something felt off the second I moved. The quiet wasn't right. I don't know how else to explain it. The house wasn't silent. It was too silent. The refrigerator wasn't humming anymore. The pipes weren't ticking. Even Cooper wasn't breathing. I looked down at him. He was awake, standing now, rigid, staring toward the bedroom door. His ears were pinned back, tail stiff, not wagging or tucked, just frozen. He didn't growl. He didn't whine. He just stared. "Hey," I whispered. My voice sounded wrong. Not echoing, not muffled, just flat, like it didn't travel far. Cooper didn't react. I swung my legs out of bed and stood up. The floor was cold under my feet, colder than usual. As I took a step, I felt a faint pressure in my chest, like being near heavy machinery or standing too close to a subwoofer. Not painful, just noticeable. I checked the window first. The blinds were closed, but I pulled one slat aside and peeked out. The street looked normal, empty. Parked cars lined the curb, no lights in the sky, no movement. The street lamp across the road was on, casting its usual yellow pool on the pavement. I looked back into the room. Still dark, still quiet. I checked my phone. The screen lit up immediately, which was a relief. 1:14 a.m., battery fine. No notifications, no weird apps open. The moment the screen lit up, I realized something else. The pressure in my chest eased slightly. I turned the phone screen off. It came back. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to decide what to do next. I felt ridiculous, like I was overreacting to nothing. Houses got quiet sometimes, appliances cycled off. Dogs stared at random things. I sat back down on the bed. Nothing changed. After a minute or two, sounds slowly returned. Not all at once. First the refrigerator, faint and distant, then the pipes. Then Cooper shook himself like he'd just woken from a deep sleep and jumped back onto the bed, curling up against my leg. The pressure faded completely. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, everything seemed normal. The clock on my nightstand was working again. I chalked it up to stress and too much caffeine. That night, it happened again. This time, I was already half asleep. The glow came through my eyelids more clearly, pulsing gently, steady enough that I could almost count it. I didn't open my eyes right away. I just lay there, frozen, afraid that if I moved, something bad would happen. I told myself to wait, to see if it stopped on its own. It didn't. I opened my eyes. Darkness. I sat up, quiet. Cooper was already awake, staring at the door again. This time I noticed something new. The air felt dense, not thick, exactly. Just resistant, like moving through humidity without the heat. When I raised my hand, it felt like there was a slight delay, like my arm had to push through something invisible. I stood up slowly and walked to the hallway. The house beyond my bedroom looked wrong, not visually. The layout was the same. The furniture was where it should be. But depth felt off, like everything was flatter than it should be. My hallway felt shorter. The living room looked closer. I whispered Cooper's name again. He didn't look at me, just kept staring ahead. I didn't go farther than the bedroom door. Something in me said that leaving the room was a bad idea. Not dangerous. Not dangerous, exactly. Just incorrect. I sat back down on the bed and waited. After what felt like several minutes, the quiet lifted again. The pressure faded. Cooper relaxed. The house returned to itself. The glow didn't come back that night. Over the next few weeks, it happened 4 more times. Always late. Always while I was lying in bed. Always the same soft, pulsing glow through my closed eyes, followed by that unnatural quiet if I sat up. I tried different things. I slept with the lights on. I slept with the TV playing quietly. I slept with my phone screen on. The glow never appeared when there was light in the room. One night, I forced myself to keep my eyes closed longer than usual. I counted pulses. 1, 2, 3. On the 7th pulse, I felt a strange sensation, like my body was slightly misaligned with itself. Like my hands were an inch behind where they should have been. I panicked and sat up. The glow vanished. The quiet came. But this time it lasted longer. I checked my phone, 1:22 a.m. When sound finally returned, I checked again, 1:29 a.m. I had no memory of those 7 minutes passing. After that, I started sleeping on the couch with the lights on. It didn't happen there, not once. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. One night I went back to my bed, lights off, phone face down on the nightstand. The glow came back within minutes. I didn't move. I kept my eyes closed and focused on my breathing. The pulsing felt closer this time, stronger, like it was inside my head rather than outside it. I had the overwhelming sense that something was aware of me, not watching exactly, more like acknowledging. I opened my eyes. Darkness. I sat up, quiet. I reached for my phone. Before my fingers touched it, I heard a faint sound. Not in my ears, but deeper. A low, distant hum that felt more like vibration than noise. I grabbed the phone and turned the screen on. Everything snapped back instantly. Sound. Space. Wait. The hum stopped. I haven't let the room go completely dark since. Sometimes, when I'm lying there at night and blinking slowly, I think I see a faint brightness behind my eyes. I don't know if it's real or just my imagination filling in gaps. I don't test it anymore. I just keep my eyes open and wait for morning. I woke up because my wrist felt tight. Not painful, just noticeable, like the band had shifted while I was sleeping. I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling for a second, trying to remember what woke me. The room was darker than usual, but not fully dark. There was a faint gray-blue glow leaking around the edges of the curtains. I reached over and checked my phone. 2:18 a.m. That didn't line up with the light outside. Normally, my street was pitch black at that hour. No streetlights on my block, just porch lights here and there. This glow felt more like early morning, but it was the wrong color. Too flat, too even. I noticed my smartwatch screen was on. That alone wasn't weird. Sometimes it lit up if I moved, but I hadn't moved much. I lifted my wrist closer to my face. It was on the activity screen. My heart rate graph was still visible, scrolling slowly. I tapped it, squinting. The brightness seemed higher than normal, like the watch thought it was daytime. The graph showed steady activity from about 140 to just after 210. Steps. Heart rate elevated. Calories burned. I frowned. "That's not right," I muttered. I hadn't been out of bed. I lived alone. The watch was snug enough that it wouldn't register random motion. And even if it did, steps didn't just log themselves. I scrolled back through the timeline. At 1:42 a.m., it logged me as standing. At 1:47, walking. At 1:53, light exercise. I felt a cold prickle run up my arms. I sat up and looked around the room. Everything was where it should be. My shoes were by the door. My keys were on the dresser. No signs I'd gone anywhere. The glow outside caught my attention again. I swung my legs out of bed and walked to the window. The floor felt colder than usual under my feet. Not drafty, just colder. I pulled the curtain back an inch. The sky was wrong. It wasn't bright like sunrise. It was this dull, washed-out gray, like someone had turned the saturation down on the night. There were no visible clouds, but I couldn't see stars either. The whole sky looked evenly lit, as if the city glow had spread everywhere at once. The houses across the street were dark. No porch lights, no headlights, no movement. I checked my phone again to make sure I hadn't misread the time. 2:19 a.m. I stood there for a full minute, just watching. The light didn't change. It didn't pulse or move. It just existed. I became aware of how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet you get when sound is missing. I couldn't hear the hum of traffic from the main road half a mile away. No distant train horn. No wind in the trees. I listened for my refrigerator. Nothing. I went into the hallway and flipped the kitchen light on. It came on instantly, which was a relief. The familiar yellow glow grounded things a little. I glanced back at my watch. My heart rate was climbing. I walked through the house, turning on lights as I went. Living room, bathroom, everything worked. No power outage, no flickering. When I looked out the living room window, the sky was still that same flat gray. I checked the watch activity again. The movement stopped at 2:11 a.m. Exactly. After that, nothing, like I'd gone completely still. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I sleepwalked. I hadn't done that since I was a kid, but stress can do weird things. I'd been working late, not sleeping great. But sleepwalking didn't explain the sky. I didn't go back to bed. I sat on the couch with the TV on low until the sky finally darkened again around 3:00. Not gradually, it just dimmed, like someone lowered a brightness slider. When morning came, everything looked normal. Blue sky, sunlight, birds loud enough to be annoying. I almost convinced myself it had been a dream, until I checked the watch again. The activity data was still there. I showed it to my coworker Erin later that day during lunch. "That's creepy," she said, scrolling through it. "You sure you didn't go for a walk or something?" "At 2 in the morning?" I said. "In my pajamas?" She shrugged. "Maybe you forgot." I didn't forget. That night, I tightened the watch band and turned on sleep tracking, something I usually didn't bother with. I also set my phone to record audio, mostly as a joke to myself. I went to bed around 11:30. I woke up to the same tight feeling on my wrist. This time, I didn't move right away. My eyes were closed, but I could see the glow through my eyelids. Same flat brightness, same even tone. I focused on staying still, heart hammering. The air felt heavy, like pressure before a storm, but there was no smell, no wind. My watch vibrated once. just a single soft buzz. I opened my eyes. The room was dim, but not fully dark. The digital clock on my nightstand was visible without its backlight. 2:14 a.m. I lifted my wrists slowly. The watch face showed my heart rate spiking, then settling. The activity ring was filling. I hadn't moved. I turned my head toward the window. The glow outside was stronger this time, bright enough that I could see the outline of the fence in my backyard through the curtains. Still no shadows, still no visible source. I swung my legs out of bed and stood up. The moment my feet hit the floor, the watch vibrated again. Longer this time, like a notification. Activity detected, the screen read. That was when fear really set in. I crossed the room and pulled the curtain back fully. The sky looked close. That's the only way I can describe it, like it had dropped lower, pressing down on the neighborhood. The glow wasn't coming from above exactly. It felt like it was everywhere at once, like the air itself was lit. I stepped back from the window, suddenly dizzy. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and unlocked it. The screen lit up my hands and chest. The moment it did, the glow outside dimmed slightly. Not gone, just weaker. I raised the phone toward the window. As soon as the screen faced the glass, the glow vanished. The sky snapped back to normal darkness. Stars visible. Porch lights back on. The usual orange haze near the horizon. Sound returned all at once. A car passed somewhere nearby. The refrigerator kicked on. My ears rang briefly, like after a loud noise. I stood there shaking. The watch buzzed again. The activity stopped at 2:16 a.m. I checked the audio recording later that morning. Most of it was just silence and the sound of my breathing. But from 1:58 to 2:16, there was a low, steady hum in the background. Not loud enough to notice in the moment, but unmistakable on playback. It wasn't electrical buzz or white noise. It had a rhythm to it, like something rotating slowly. I took the watch off after that. I stopped wearing it to bed. I even tried sleeping without my phone in the room. The glow still came back once more, a week later, but weaker. I woke up to the same dull brightness and a sense that I'd been doing something just before waking, something physical, like walking or standing, but the memory was gone the moment I tried to focus on it. That night, the watch was on my dresser. In the morning, it showed activity anyway. I don't wear it anymore. Sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, the room feels just a little too visible, like my eyes don't need as much light as they should. When that happens, I stay very still and don't look at the window. By morning, everything is normal again. At least, it looks that way. I was walking the gravel loop outside my parents' place just before sunset. It was late September, the kind of evening where the air was cool but not cold yet, and everything smelled like dry grass and soil. I'd been staying there for a few weeks after my breakup, working remotely and trying to reset my head. The loop ran along the edge of a cornfield, then dipped past a line of trees before circling back toward the house. I walked it almost every evening. Same pace, same route, earbuds in, but nothing playing half the time. That night was quiet in the normal rural way. No cars, a few birds settling down, crickets just starting up. The sky was still light enough that the fields looked gray-green instead of black. I had just passed the old irrigation pump when I noticed the light. At first, I thought it was a tractor. There were a couple of farms nearby, and sometimes people worked late. But this light was wrong for that. It was too steady, no blinking, no beam. Just a small, round glow hovering low over the field, maybe 50 or 60 yards out. It was about chest height relative to the corn. Not high, not touching the ground either. I stopped walking without really meaning to. The light didn't react, it didn't brighten or dim, it just stayed there, a dull white yellow like a distant porch light seen through fog. Except there was no fog and no structure out there. I took one earbud out, no sound, no engine, no insects near it. The crickets around me were still going, but the area near the light felt muted, like the sound thinned out as it got closer to it. I told myself it was probably a drone. People flew drones out here sometimes, even though it annoyed everyone. But I'd never seen one hover that low without wobbling, and I couldn't hear anything at all. The light moved, not toward me, not away. It drifted sideways, perfectly level, like it was sliding along an invisible rail. No bobbing, no tilt. just smooth lateral movement across the field, passing in front of the corn rows without illuminating them. That part stuck with me immediately. The light didn't cast anything, no shadows, no reflection on the leaves. The corn stayed dark, even as the light crossed in front of it. I felt my stomach tighten, that cold drop feeling you get when something doesn't line up with how it should work. I took a few slow steps forward, crunching on the gravel. The light didn't change speed or direction. It kept drifting, steady as a metronome. I remember thinking very clearly that if I didn't document it, I'd regret it later. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The second my fingers wrapped around it, the light vanished. Not faded, not zipped away. It was just gone. 1 second there, the next second nothing but empty field. I stopped dead. I looked at the screen anyway, like maybe it would show up on camera even if I couldn't see it anymore. The phone unlocked normally. No glitches, no static, just the live view of the darkening field. Nothing. I stood there for a long time, phone in my hand, listening to my own breathing. The crickets sounded normal again. The air felt normal. The field looked exactly like it always did. I felt stupid, standing there with my phone out, heart racing over nothing. I walked the rest of the loop faster than usual and didn't look back at the field. That night, I told myself it was probably someone testing a drone with the lights off, or some weird reflection, or my eyes playing tricks as the light changed. But the next evening, I walked the loop again. Nothing happened. The evening after that, same thing. A week went by and I started to relax. I figured my brain had latched onto a moment and blown it out of proportion. Then it happened again. This time, it was later. The sky was darker, almost fully night. The moon was up, thin and sharp. I was halfway along the field when the light appeared in almost the same spot as before. Same size, same color, same height. I froze instantly. It drifted sideways again, same direction, same speed. Watching it felt surreal, like I was replaying a video instead of seeing something live. I didn't pull my phone out this time. I just watched. The light moved for maybe 10 seconds, then stopped. It hovered there, completely still. I became aware of a pressure in my ears, faint but noticeable, like the start of altitude change. My skin prickled, especially along my arms. I had the overwhelming urge not to move. After a few seconds, the light dimmed slightly. Not much, just enough that I wondered if it was about to fade. Instead, it snapped off, again, instantly. The pressure in my ears released at the same moment, like someone popped them from the inside. I stood there shaking, hands clenched, trying to get my breathing under control. I didn't check my phone. I didn't step closer. I just turned around and walked straight home. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept replaying the movement in my head. The way it slid sideways without changing altitude, the way it didn't light anything around it. The next day, I asked my dad casually if anyone nearby flew drones at night. He shrugged. Sometimes, but you can always hear those things. I didn't mention the light. Over the next month, it showed up 3 more times, always in the same general area of the field, always moving sideways, always vanishing when I acknowledged it too directly, either by reaching for my phone or taking a step toward it. Once, I tried an experiment. I pulled my phone out before the light appeared and kept it in my hand, camera open. The light never showed up that night. Another time, I left my phone at home entirely. The light appeared, drifted, hovered, and stayed visible longer than it ever had before. Almost 30 seconds. That was the night I noticed something else. As it hovered, I felt like the space around it wasn't quite right. The stars behind it looked slightly warped, like heat shimmer on asphalt, except it was localized just around the light. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were dry. The distortion stayed. The moment I turned my head, even slightly, the light vanished again. I stopped walking the loop after that. A few weeks later, I moved back into my apartment in the city. Life filled up with noise and people and schedules, and the memory faded into something that felt unreal, like a vivid dream you're not sure actually happened. But sometimes, when I visit my parents and look out over that field at dusk, I get the sense that something is still there. Not visible, just present. I don't bring my phone with me anymore when I walk near it. I don't know why. I was lying on the hood of my car in my friend Mark's driveway, hands folded on my chest, staring up at the sky. It was late summer, still warm after sunset, the kind of night where the air felt soft instead of cool. Mark lived just far enough outside town that the stars showed up properly. Not amazing, but good enough to spot constellations without trying too hard. We'd been talking about nothing important, work stuff, old stories from college. He had a beer in one hand, I had a soda, both of us half lost in the sky more than the conversation. "See that?" Mark said, pointing vaguely upward. "That one's Jupiter, I think." "That's not Jupiter," I said automatically. "Jupiter's way brighter." He shrugged. "Whatever. It's something." I followed his finger anyway, tracing the patch of sky he meant. A few familiar stars, a couple I couldn't name, nothing unusual. Then I noticed one of them was moving. At first I thought my eyes were tired. When you stare at the sky long enough, things can seem to drift, but this wasn't that. One star, small, steady, not blinking, was sliding slowly to the right, like someone nudging it across the sky. It wasn't fast. No streak, no flare, just a gradual, deliberate movement. I held my breath without realizing it. "Mark," I said, keeping my voice even. "Are you seeing this?" "Seeing what?" "That star. Just above the tree line, the one between those two." He leaned closer, squinting. "Which one?" I raised my arm and pointed. The instant my finger lined up with it, the star stopped, not slowed, not eased to a halt. Stopped. It locked into place like it had always been there. My arm stayed frozen in midair. "You see it?" I asked. Mark stared for a few seconds, then laughed. "Dude, that's not moving. That's just a star." My mouth felt dry. I lowered my arm slowly and kept watching. Nothing happened. The star sat perfectly still, identical to the others around it. Same brightness. Same color. No flicker. "Okay," I said, forcing a chuckle. "Probably a satellite and I lost track of it." "Yeah," Mark said. "Probably. But satellites didn't move like that. And they didn't stop the second someone noticed them." I didn't say that out loud. We went back to talking, but my attention kept snapping back to that patch of sky. Every few seconds I checked the star again, half expecting it to start sliding once more. It didn't. After a while, Mark went inside to grab another beer. I stayed put, eyes fixed upward, the night sounds filling in around me, crickets, distant dogs, a car passing somewhere far off. The star moved again, same direction, same slow, sideways drift. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I watched it for a full 5 seconds this time, long enough to be sure. It covered a noticeable distance, slipping out of alignment with the stars around it. I didn't point. I didn't move at all. "Mark," I called, trying to keep my voice calm. "Come look at this." He stepped back out onto the driveway. "What now?" "That star," I said. "Just look. Don't say anything. Just watch." He followed my gaze. We lay there in silence, staring at the same patch of sky. The star kept moving. I could feel the tension rolling off him now, the shift from casual to focused. "Okay," he said quietly. "Yeah, that's weird." The star drifted for another second. Then Mark lifted his hand and pointed. It stopped instantly. We both sat up. "What the hell?" he muttered. "Don't point," I said too quickly. "Just look." He lowered his hand, frowning. We watched in silence. Nothing happened. The star stayed locked in place again as if it had never moved at all. Mark laughed nervously. "Okay, that's not normal." "No," I said. "It's not." We tried to reason it out. Planes, satellites, drones, optical illusions. None of it fit cleanly. The movement was wrong, too smooth, too controlled, and the way it stopped. Both times, right when someone actively drew attention to it. "That's creepy," Mark said. "It's like it knows when you're pointing at it." "Don't say that," I said, though the thought had already been sitting in my head. We watched the sky for another 10 minutes. Nothing else moved. The star didn't budge again. Eventually, Mark checked his phone and said he needed to head inside. Early morning the next day, I stayed a few minutes longer, alone on the hood of my car, staring up until my neck ached. When I finally drove home, I kept glancing at the sky through the windshield, half expecting to see something slide out of place again. I didn't. A few nights later, I was back in my own backyard, lying on the grass with a blanket. Clear night, cooler air. I told myself I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I found the same star. It was easy to pick out once you knew where it should be. I stared at it for a long time. Nothing happened. I started to feel stupid, like I'd built the whole thing up in my head. I rolled onto my side, looking at other constellations, letting my thoughts wander. When I looked back, the star was moving again. This time it slid downward, toward the horizon, still slow and steady. No flicker, no change in brightness. I whispered, okay, to myself, not sure what I was acknowledging. I didn't point, I didn't move my hands at all. I watched until my eyes watered. After several seconds, I felt this odd pressure behind my eyes, like the start of a headache. The longer I focused, the stronger it got. My chest felt tight, like I wasn't breathing deeply enough. The star kept drifting. I broke eye contact, blinking hard, and the pressure faded immediately. When I looked back, the star was still. Exactly still. I laughed out loud, sharp and humorless. Nope, I said. I'm done. I went inside and didn't look at the sky the rest of the night. Over the next few weeks, it happened 3 more times, always subtle. Always when I was alone or with someone else who could see it too. And always, the moment someone directly indicated it, pointing, naming it, trying to show it, it stopped, like it was reacting to attention itself, not movement. One night, my sister Lila was over. We were sitting on the porch steps talking quietly. I saw the star begin to slide again. I didn't point. Hey, I said casually, do you see that star up there? Which one? She asked. The one just left of that brighter cluster. She followed my gaze. The star froze. She squinted. They all looked the same to me. Yeah, I said, never mind. I stopped bringing it up after that. I still look at the sky a lot, probably more than I used to. Sometimes I catch myself scanning for motion instead of patterns. Every once in a while, I think I see something shift, just slightly. But I don't test it anymore. I don't point. I don't call anyone over. I just look away and pretend I didn't notice. Whatever it is, it seems to prefer that. I was driving home later than I meant to, coming back from my sister's place outside of town. It was one of those unplanned visits that runs long without anyone noticing. By the time I left, it was close to midnight and the fog had rolled in thick while we were inside. The road back to my place was a 2-lane highway that cut through farmland and patches of woods. No streetlights, just reflectors on the guardrails and the occasional mailbox flashing by. I drove it all the time, knew every bend and dip without thinking. That night, the fog sat low and heavy, not swirling so much as hanging there like it had weight. My headlights carved out a short tunnel in front of the car, everything beyond that swallowed up. I slowed down more than usual, radio off, window cracked just enough to hear the tires on the pavement. About 10 minutes in, I noticed the fog ahead looked different. Thicker, maybe. Not darker, exactly, just uneven, like there was a gap or a shadow inside it. I eased off the gas. At first, I thought it was a low cloud drifting across the road, or maybe exhaust from a truck I couldn't see yet. But as I got closer, the shape didn't move. It stayed right where it was, suspended above the asphalt, maybe 20 or 30 yards ahead. It wasn't touching the ground. That's what made my stomach tighten. It was dark, darker than the fog around it, like a chunk of night had been cut out and hung there, no sharp edges. Just a bulky, uneven shape, wide enough to stretch across most of the lane. It hovered a few feet above the road, low enough that my headlights brushed the bottom of it but didn't light it up. I slowed to a crawl without fully deciding to. My first clear thought was that something had fallen off a truck. A tarp, maybe. But it wasn't sagging. It wasn't flapping. It didn't react to the wind from my car at all. I remember checking my mirrors, thinking maybe I was about to hit smoke from a fire or dust kicked up by farm equipment. But there was no smell. No movement. The shape stayed perfectly still. My hands were tight on the steering wheel. I was aware of my breathing getting shallow, fast. The inside of the car felt too quiet, like the sound was being absorbed. I rolled the window down another inch, then stopped. Something about the air outside felt wrong. Not cold or warm, just empty. I came to a full stop. The car idled softly beneath me, headlights on, fog pressing in from all sides. The shape hung there, blocking the road. I stared at it for a long time. Long enough that the urge to turn around crept in, slow and insistent. I checked the clock on the dash. It was working. The seconds were ticking forward like normal. I thought about getting out of the car and immediately dismissed the idea. I didn't even reach for the door handle. The idea of standing under that thing made my chest feel tight. Instead, I nudged the car forward. The headlights pushed deeper into the fog, brushing the lower edge of the shape. Still no reflection, no detail, just absence. Then, as I got close enough that I should have been directly under it, the fog thinned all at once. Not gradually, not drifting away. It was like someone had erased it. One second, the shape was there, hovering over the road. The next, the air ahead was clear, and the road stretched empty and familiar in front of me. I slammed the brakes hard enough to jolt myself against the seatbelt. There was nothing there. No debris. No marks on the pavement. No shadow. Just open road, the faint glow of my headlights, and fields disappearing into darkness on either side. The fog behind me stayed thick. Ahead of me, it was clear for a long stretch, like I'd crossed some invisible line. I sat there with my foot on the brake, heart pounding, scanning the road, the ditches, the sky above the tree line. Nothing moved. No sound except my engine and my own breathing. After a few seconds, the fog began creeping forward again, slowly filling in the space ahead, like it was reclaiming it. I didn't wait. I drove the rest of the way home without stopping, barely aware of my speed, eyes flicking constantly between the road and the edges of the fog. Every time the headlights caught a thicker patch, my pulse jumped. When I got home, I sat in the driveway longer than usual, engine still running, listening. The neighborhood was quiet, normal. Porch lights, a dog barking somewhere far off. Inside, everything felt slightly off. Not wrong in a dramatic way, just muted, like the house was holding its breath. I checked the windows, the locks, the back door. Everything was fine. I barely slept. The next morning, I drove that same stretch of road in daylight. Clear sky, no fog, nothing out of place. I even pulled over near where I thought it had happened and walked along the shoulder, feeling stupid the whole time. There was nothing. No scorch marks, no broken grass, no sign that anything had ever been there. I told myself it was fog playing tricks on my eyes, that I'd been tired, that the darkness had filled in gaps my brain couldn't handle. But a week later, I ran into a guy named Trevor at the gas station near my work. We weren't close, just the kind of people who recognized each other from around town. He mentioned the fog the other night, how bad it had been on the highway. "Yeah," I said carefully. "Weird fog." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Did you see anything strange?" My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't know. Probably nothing. Thought I saw something over the road, like a shadow or something. Then it was gone." I didn't tell him what I'd seen. I just nodded and said, "Fog does that." Since then, I've driven that road dozens of times. Most nights, it's just a road, just fog, just darkness and headlights. But every once in a while, when the fog is thick and the world narrows down to that small tunnel of light, I get this feeling that I'm approaching something, like the road is about to end in midair. When that happens, I slow down without thinking, and I keep my eyes forward. I don't look too hard into the fog anymore. The insects stopped all at once. I didn't notice it immediately, not consciously. It was more like my body reacted before my brain did. My shoulders tightened, and I lifted my head from where I'd been staring into the fire. The forest had gone quiet in a way that didn't feel natural, like someone had closed a door on the night. I was camping alone at a small state forest about 2 hours from where I lived. Nothing remote or extreme, just a basic campsite off a dirt road, like a fire ring, a picnic table, and trees packed close enough that you couldn't see more than 30 or 40 feet in any direction. I'd been there before. I liked it because it was usually empty during the week. It was late summer, still warm even after dark. The bugs had been loud all evening. Crickets, cicadas, something buzzing near the water down the slope, the usual background noise you stop noticing after a while. Then it was gone. I sat still, listening. The fire popped softly and I could hear my own breathing. No wind in the leaves, no distant traffic, no insects. I remember thinking maybe it was just a lull. That happens sometimes. But it felt wrong. Too complete. Like every living thing had decided to stop at the same moment. I stood up slowly, careful not to kick the log I was sitting on. My flashlight was hanging from a hook on the picnic table, and I grabbed it without turning it on yet. The darkness around the campsite felt thicker than it had a minute earlier, like the shadows had crept closer. That was when I heard the humming. At first, I thought it was inside my head. A low vibration, barely there, like standing near a transformer or heavy machinery a long way off. It didn't come from any clear direction. It was just present, in the air, in my chest. I held my breath to see if it would stop. It didn't. The humming grew slightly stronger, enough that I could feel it in my teeth if I clenched my jaw. My stomach fluttered, and I had the sudden urge to sit down, like my legs had forgotten what they were supposed to do. I clicked on the flashlight and swept it around the campsite. The beam caught the trunks of trees, the edges of my tent, the cooler by the table. Everything looked normal. No movement, no shapes beyond what I expected. The humming continued. I tilted the flashlight upward, scanning the lower branches overhead. The light cut through leaves and needles, but the canopy was thick. I couldn't see the sky from where I stood. I took a few steps away from the fire toward the edge of the clearing. The ground sloped gently down there, and beyond it was dense forest. As I moved, the humming changed slightly, like it was reacting to me. Not louder or quieter, just different. The pitch shifted in a way that made my skin prickle. I stopped. The humming stopped too. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Not just quiet, but empty, like sound itself had been drained out of the space around me. I stood there for a long moment, heart thudding, flashlight beam fixed on a cluster of trees. I half expected something to step into the light. Nothing did. Then, slowly, faintly, the insects began to return. One cricket chirped, then another. Somewhere deeper in the woods, a cicada started up, tentative at first, then louder. The night noise rebuilt itself in pieces, like it was being turned back on section by section. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I told myself it was nothing. Some weird atmospheric thing, maybe distant machinery, maybe my ears playing tricks on me. I even laughed quietly, trying to break the tension. I went back to the fire, sat down, and poked at the embers. The flames flared briefly, then settled. The woods sounded normal again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had passed through the area. Something that didn't belong there and hadn't fully left yet. I stayed up longer than I planned, feeding the fire and scanning the trees. Nothing else happened for a while. The night stayed warm and noisy, like it always did. Around midnight, I decided to turn in. I doused the fire, zipped up the tent, and lay on my back staring at the dark fabric ceiling. My flashlight sat by my hand, just in case. I must have drifted off at some point, because the next thing I remember was waking up with that same humming in my chest. My eyes snapped open. The tent was dark, but not completely. There was a faint, diffuse light outside, not bright enough to cast shadows, just enough to make the nylon walls glow a dull gray. The humming was stronger now, not loud, but deep, steady. It felt like it was coming from above the tent, pressing down. I checked my phone. No signal, as expected. The time read 2:17 a.m. I lay there, frozen, listening. The insects were gone again, completely. I sat up slowly, my movements careful and quiet. The humming didn't change this time. It just continued, unbothered. I reached for the zipper and stopped myself. Something about opening the tent felt like a mistake. I didn't know why. I just knew. Instead, I pressed my ear against the tent wall. The sound wasn't directional. It didn't get louder or quieter when I shifted. It was everywhere at once. After what felt like a long time, though I didn't check the clock again, the humming began to fade. Not abruptly. It softened, like it was moving away or sinking into the ground. When it stopped, the silence lingered for a few seconds longer than it should have. Then the night came back. Crickets. Leaves rustling. Something small moving through underbrush. The light outside the tent faded too, leaving everything pitch black again. I didn't sleep after that. At first light, I packed up faster than I ever had before. I didn't eat breakfast. I didn't linger. I loaded my gear, took one last look around the campsite, and left. Nothing looked disturbed, no marks in the dirt, no broken branches. The forest was quiet in a normal morning way. On the drive home, I tried to talk myself out of it, tried to pin it on nerves, isolation, imagination, but every explanation felt thin. A week later, I mentioned the trip to a coworker named Alex during lunch. He asked where I'd gone, and when I told him the forest name, his expression shifted slightly. "Did you hear anything weird at night?" he asked, half joking. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "What kind of weird?" I said. He shrugged. "People talk about sounds cutting out. Humming, stuff like that, probably nonsense." I didn't say anything else. I haven't been back to that campsite since. I still camp, just not there. And sometimes, late at night, when everything goes quiet for a second longer than it should, I feel that same pressure in my chest and have to remind myself to breathe. The night always comes back. But now I know it can leave. I noticed it because the water didn't look right. I was sitting on a folding chair at the edge of the lake, boots off, socks rolled down, letting my feet dry in the cool air. Uh, it was late evening, just past sunset, that in-between time where the sky still held some color, but the woods had already started to darken. The lake was calm, almost flat, with only small ripples drifting toward shore. I'd come out alone after work. I live in a small town, and this lake sits about 15 minutes outside it, surrounded by state land. No houses right on the shore, no marina, no lights except a gravel lot with a single flickering lamp. It was a place people fished or drank beers or sat quietly when they didn't want to talk to anyone. That night it was quiet. No wind, no insects yet, just the occasional bird settling in somewhere behind me. I was scrolling through my phone, barely paying attention to the water, when I saw a pale glow under the surface, maybe 20 yards out. At first I thought it was just a reflection from the sky, some leftover light catching the angle wrong. Then it moved. The glow slid sideways, perfectly straight, like someone dragging a dim flashlight beam beneath the water. It didn't wobble or ripple. It didn't spread out. It stayed contained, a soft oval of light, gliding just under the surface. I lowered my phone without thinking and leaned forward. The water above the glow didn't react. No wake, no bubbles, no disturbance at all. It was like the light was passing through solid glass. I stood up slowly, heart starting to thump for no clear reason. My first thought was a submerged boat light or maybe some kind of underwater drone, but that didn't make sense here. This wasn't a recreational lake. No boats allowed with motors, and even if there were, the light was wrong. Too even, too muted. The glow continued its path, steady and unhurried, moving from left to right across the lake. I watched it pass through darker water, through faint reflections of trees, never changing shape. I remember saying out loud, "What the hell is that?" Just to hear a voice. The glow reached a point roughly in front of me, maybe 10 yards offshore, and then it faded. Not abruptly. It dimmed like a light being lowered on a dial until there was nothing left. The water stayed calm. I waited for something to break the surface. A splash, a ripple, anything. Nothing happened. I stood there longer than I meant to, scanning the water, half expecting the glow to reappear somewhere else. It didn't. Eventually, I sat back down, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe some weird bioluminescence. Maybe a trick of the light. I pulled out my phone again, Googled phrases like glowing lake water and underwater light moving straight line. The results were useless. A few minutes later, the insects started up. Crickets, then something buzzing near the reeds. The normal night sounds returned, and with them came that uneasy feeling that I'd missed something important. I packed up and left earlier than planned. The next night, I came back. I told myself I just wanted to prove it was nothing, that I'd misseen something and needed closure. I brought a flashlight, a thermos of coffee, and my phone fully charged. It was darker when I arrived, clouds covering most of the sky. The lake looked like a sheet of black glass. I sat in the same spot as before and waited. Nothing happened for a long time. I almost gave up and started packing again when I noticed the glow, farther out this time. It appeared suddenly, like it had been switched on, maybe 40 yards from shore. My stomach dropped. The light moved again in that same straight, precise line. No hesitation. No variation. It cut across the lake as if following an invisible track. I stood up, my hands shaking enough that I noticed it. I pulled out my phone and started recording, holding it steady on the water. The glow didn't react. It didn't speed up or slow down. It didn't rise. It just kept moving. As it passed closer to shore, I realized something else that made my skin prickle. The glow wasn't illuminating anything. It didn't cast light onto the underside of the surface. It didn't brighten the water around it. It was visible, but it didn't light. Like it wasn't actually light at all. My phone buzzed, the screen briefly flickering. I glanced down for half a second. When I looked back up, the glow was gone. I checked the video immediately. The recording was there, but when I scrubbed through it, the water stayed dark the entire time. No glow, no movement, just black ripples and distant reflections. I stood there breathing hard, the phone heavy in my hand. Behind me, somewhere in the trees, a branch snapped. I spun around, flashlight up, heart racing. The beam caught trunks and leaves, nothing else, no footsteps, no voices. I left again. Over the next week, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went back twice more, each time telling myself it was the last. Both times, the glow appeared. Different distances, same motion. Always straight, always silent, always gone before reaching the surface. Once, I thought I felt something through my feet, a faint vibration through the ground, like a heavy vehicle passing far away. Another time, my watch reset itself while I was standing there, jumping back exactly 3 minutes. I stopped trying to record it. The last night I went, the lake felt wrong even before anything happened. The air was too still. The insects hadn't started yet, even though it was well past dusk. The clouds hung low, dull, and heavy. The glow appeared closer than ever, maybe 10 yards out. It moved directly toward my position, not at me exactly, but parallel to the shore. As it passed in front of me, I noticed something new. The water above it wasn't reflecting the sky. Everywhere else, the surface showed faint cloud shapes, darker patches. Above the glow, the reflection was blank, empty, like a strip cut out of the lake. I took an involuntary step back. The glow slowed, just slightly, and for a moment I had the overwhelming sense that it was aware of me. Not watching, just accounting for me, like I was an obstacle on a route. Then it faded again, leaving the water unchanged. A few seconds later, the insects started up all at once, loud enough to make me flinch. I didn't stay. I haven't been back to the lake since. I drive past it sometimes and it looks normal, peaceful. Just water and trees and a quiet road. But now, whenever I'm near large bodies of water at night, I catch myself staring at the surface, waiting to see that soft, sliding glow beneath it. And sometimes, when the water goes too still, I get the feeling that whatever it was is still moving, just deeper now, following paths I can't see. The first alert came at 2:17 a.m., and it woke me up because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing on the nightstand. I fumbled for it, half asleep, already annoyed. We'd had false alarms before. Moths, rain, a raccoon once. I expected the same thing. The notification just said motion detected, side yard camera. I opened the app, squinting at the screen. The clip loaded, grainy black and white footage from the infrared camera. It showed the side of my house, the fence line, the trash bins. Nothing was moving. Then, for about half a second, the entire frame washed out in white. Not like headlights or a flashlight. It was more like the exposure spiked all at once. Then it went back to normal. That was it. I scrubbed back and replayed it 3 times. Same thing. No shapes, no shadows, no person. Just that brief flash, like the camera blinked. I checked the timestamp. 2:70 a.m., I set the phone down and tried to go back to sleep. I remember lying there thinking about how quiet the house felt. No AC kicking on, no cars passing. Even the usual hum from the fridge seemed distant. I eventually fell asleep again. The next morning, while making coffee, I checked the system on the tablet in the kitchen. There were 3 alerts overnight, all from the same camera, all at 2:17 a.m. on the dot. Each clip showed the same thing. Nothing, then a flash. I mentioned it to my wife, Erin, while she was packing lunches for the kids. Probably a bug flying close to the lens, she said without looking up. Or a software thing. Every night at the exact same second? I asked. She shrugged. Reboot it later. I forgot about it for most of the day. That night, I stayed up later than usual. I didn't tell Erin why. I just said I couldn't sleep and ended up on the couch with the TV on low. Around 2:10, I muted it and waited. The house creaked like it always did. Pipes ticking, the faint rush of cars on the highway a mile away. At 2:17, my phone buzzed. Side yard camera. I opened the app immediately. Same flash, same empty frame. What I hadn't noticed before was the sound. There was audio on the clip. Normally it was just ambient noise, wind, distant traffic, maybe a dog barking somewhere. This time during the flash, there was a low click. Not loud, not sharp, more like a soft electrical tap. I replayed it, volume up, click, then nothing. I got up and walked to the kitchen window that looked out onto the side yard. The night was clear. No motion lights on, no cars, just the fence and the neighbor's dark house beyond it. I stood there for a while, listening. Everything sounded normal again. The next night, it happened again, and the night after that. Always 2:17 a.m., same camera, same flash, same quiet click. I checked the system logs, no errors, no firmware updates, no explanation. I repositioned the camera, cleaned the lens, adjusted sensitivity. Nothing changed. On the 4th night, a second camera triggered, the one pointed at the backyard. Same time, same flash, 2 different angles, 2 different views, both washed out at the same instant. The flashes weren't identical either. The backyard one looked slightly dimmer, like it was farther from whatever caused it. That's when I started feeling genuinely unsettled. I showed Erin the clips the next morning. She frowned, watching them back to back. "That's weird," she said, "but it's probably just some glitch." "Why only at night?" I asked. "Why the same minute?" She didn't answer that. I checked the kids' room cameras next. No alerts, no flashes, just normal footage. On the 6th night, I stayed awake again. This time, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, watching the live feed from the side yard camera. 2:16 a.m. came and went. At 2:17 exactly, the live feed didn't flash. Instead, it froze. The image locked in place for about 1 second, then updated. The motion alert came through a half-second later, like the system was catching up. The recording showed the flash, the live feed never did. That messed with me more than the flashes themselves. I stepped outside onto the back porch without thinking. The air felt heavy, like before a storm, even though the forecast was clear. I looked up. The sky over our house looked wrong. Not dramatically, just slightly brighter than it should have been. Like the darkness had been thinned out. It faded after a few seconds. I went back inside, heart pounding, and locked the door. The next day, I called the security company. They ran diagnostics remotely, told me everything looked normal, suggested maybe nearby electrical interference. "From what?" I asked. "Could be anything," the guy said. "Power lines, industrial equipment, even atmospheric stuff." We didn't live near any of that. On the 8th night, I noticed something new. The timestamp on the clip still read 2:17 a.m., but the duration was longer. Instead of a single flash, there were 2. The first was faint, the second was brighter. Between them, the camera picked up a brief distortion. The image warped slightly, like heat shimmer, even though it was cold out. The audio caught something else too, a low tone just under the range where you're sure you're hearing it. It lasted maybe half a second. I didn't sleep after that. On the 9th night, Erin woke up around 2:20 and found me standing in the hallway staring at my phone. "Are you okay?" she asked. "It happened again," I said. She watched the clip, then looked at me differently than before. Less dismissive, more careful. "Did you go outside?" she asked. "No." She nodded, like she'd already been worried about that. On the 10th night, every exterior camera triggered at once. Front yard, side yard, backyard. All at 2:17 a.m. The flashes weren't uniform. The front yard camera showed the brightest one yet, a clean white burst that erased the image completely for a full second. The side yard showed the usual washout. The backyard barely flashed at all. None of them showed a source. I checked the timestamps again, all exactly the same. What scared me most wasn't the light, it was the stillness afterward. No wind noise, no insects, even the audio felt hollow, like something had sucked the sound out of the space for a moment. After that night, the alerts stopped. No flashes, no clicks, nothing. The cameras went back to normal, like nothing had ever happened. I told myself it was over, that whatever glitch it was had resolved itself. 2 weeks later, I checked the system logs while deleting old footage. There was an entry I didn't recognize, no camera name, no clip attached, just a system note at 2:17 a.m., motion event acknowledged. That phrase didn't appear anywhere else in the logs. Ever. I scrolled back through months of data, nothing like it. That same night, I stood in the backyard just before going to bed, looking up at the sky. It was overcast, stars hidden. The darkness felt thicker directly above the house, like a low ceiling. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed once. No alert, just a vibration. I looked at the cameras the next morning. No footage, but every exterior camera showed the exact same timestamp gap. 1 second missing. Cleanly cut, like it had been removed. Nothing else has happened since. The system works, the alerts are normal, life goes on. But sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I check the time without meaning to. And if it's close to 2:17, I don't look at my phone. I just lie there, listening, waiting to see if the house will go quiet again. My dog stopped before I did. 1 second, Milo was trotting along like always, nose down, tail loose, the leash slack in my hand. The next, he planted his feet and leaned back like he'd hit an invisible wall. I almost walked into him. It was just after 9 p.m., early fall, one of those nights where it wasn't cold yet, but the air felt thinner than usual. I'd taken the long loop through the older part of the neighborhood, the one with big trees and no streetlights for half a block at a time. "Come on," I said, giving the leash a gentle tug. He didn't move. He wasn't growling or barking, just staring ahead with his ears slightly back. That alone wasn't weird. Milo froze like that sometimes if he smelled a cat or heard something I couldn't. What caught my attention was my shadow. It stretched out in front of me, long and sharp, angled toward the houses instead of back toward the streetlight behind us. For a split second, my brain tried to correct it, like I was misjudging where the light was coming from. I turned around. The streetlight was still on, humming faintly, casting the same dull yellow cone it always did. Nothing behind me that should have changed anything. But my shadow didn't line up with it. It was pulling forward, too long, like there was another light source somewhere ahead of us. Except the road in front was darker, not brighter. I took a step forward. The shadow stretched farther, exaggerated, almost cartoonish. Milo whimpered quietly. That's when I noticed the light. It wasn't bright. That's the thing. It was more like a pale glow, high above the trees, barely strong enough to register unless you were already looking for it. The color reminded me of moonlight through fog, except the sky was clear and the moon was nowhere near that part of the sky. The glow didn't move fast, it just hung there. I felt stupid standing in the middle of the sidewalk, staring upward, but I couldn't stop. There was a pressure in my ears like the moment before they pop on a plane, and my chest felt tight in a way that didn't quite hurt. The light dimmed slightly, and my shadow snapped back to normal. It didn't slide or fade. It just corrected itself instantly, like a rubber band released. Same length, same angle as it should have been all along. Milo immediately started pulling forward, tail tucked, nails clicking on the concrete. He wanted to go home, and for once I didn't argue. I didn't look back up again. I walked fast the rest of the way, keys already between my fingers by the time our house came into view. I kept telling myself it was some weird angle, maybe a car cresting a hill somewhere, maybe my eyes playing tricks in the dark. Inside, everything felt normal again. Too normal. Milo drank half his water bowl in one go, then curled up tight on the rug instead of following me around like usual. I didn't tell my wife Hannah about it that night. She was already asleep, and I didn't feel like trying to explain something I didn't understand myself. The next evening, I took Milo out earlier. I paid attention to my shadow the entire time, probably looking ridiculous, checking angles, glancing at the ground more than the street. Everything behaved exactly how it should. I almost convinced myself it was nothing. On the third night, it happened again. Different street, different time, same dog. We were cutting through a short path that connected two cul-de-sacs, a narrow strip of sidewalk with trees close on both sides. There was a single lamp at the far end, dim and flickering like it always did. Milo slowed before I did this time. Not a full stop, but cautious. I looked down, my shadow was wrong again. This time it wasn't stretched forward. It was angled sharply to the left, cutting across the sidewalk and into the grass, even though the only visible light source was directly behind us. I followed the shadow with my eyes, tracing it back. The glow was back. Lower this time. Closer. I could see it clearly between the branches, a dull, rounded brightness that didn't blink or flicker. It wasn't harsh enough to light the ground, but it was strong enough to mess with the shadows. I realized I couldn't hear anything. No insects. No distant traffic. No wind in the leaves. Milo sat down, which he never did on walks unless he was exhausted or scared. He stared upward, head tilted slightly, like he was tracking something I couldn't quite see. The glow pulsed once, very gently. My shadow snapped back into place. Sound rushed back in all at once. Crickets, leaves, the faint hiss of tires somewhere nearby. Milo stood up immediately and started pulling again. I got home shaking. This time I told Hannah. She listened quietly, arms crossed, face unriddable. When I finished, she didn't laugh or brush it off, which somehow made it worse. "Maybe stop walking that route at night," she said. "At least for a while." I agreed too quickly. For the next week, I stuck to well-lit streets, earlier walks, shorter loops. Nothing happened. Milo went back to normal. I slept better. Then one night, Hannah was late getting home from work. I took Milo out around 10, figuring one quick loop wouldn't hurt. Halfway down our own street, the shadow shifted. I hadn't even looked up yet. I just knew. This time, the shadow shortened instead of stretching, collapsing inward like the light source was directly above us. It pooled beneath my feet in a way that made no sense at all. I slowly raised my head. The glow was almost directly overhead now, barely visible against the sky, like a patch of brightness where the darkness had thinned. It wasn't circular, the edges were uneven, soft like light seen through rippling water. I felt that pressure again, stronger this time. My heart was racing, but my body felt heavy, like moving through syrup. Milo lay down flat on the sidewalk. The glow dimmed. For a split second, my shadow went the wrong way entirely, stretching upward, climbing the side of the house next to us, warped and tall and not shaped like me at all. Then the light faded. Everything snapped back into place. A car turned onto the street. Porch lights glowed. Milo scrambled to his feet, whining softly. I didn't finish the walk. The next morning, I checked my phone without knowing why. The health app showed my heart rate spiking around 10:07 p.m., then dropping sharply. There was a 2-minute gap in the data where nothing recorded at all. I didn't remember losing time. Not exactly, just a fuzzy stretch between noticing the glow and hearing the car. After that, I started noticing other things. My outdoor security camera showed subtle exposure changes around the same time of night. Not enough to trigger alerts, but enough that I could see the image brighten and dim slightly if I scrubbed through the footage. Milo refused to go out after dark anymore. He'd plant himself by the door and shake until I brought him back inside. I stopped walking at night entirely. Weeks passed, nothing else happened. The anxiety dulled, but it didn't go away. One evening, just before sunset, I was standing in the backyard when I caught my shadow stretching the wrong way again. Just for a moment. So brief, I almost missed it. I looked up. Nothing there. But the air felt tight, like it was waiting for something. It's been months now. I still check my shadow without thinking whenever I'm outside. I still feel that pressure sometimes, especially at night, especially when the sky is clear and quiet. Nothing bad has happened, no missing people, no strange marks, no answers, just the sense that whatever caused it noticed me, noticing. And that if I look up at the wrong moment again, it might not snap back next time. I found out the next morning when Mark asked me if I was feeling okay. He caught me as I was getting into my car for work. He lives 2 houses down, close enough that we wave at each other, but not close enough that we usually talk before coffee. "Hey," he said, squinting like he was trying to decide how to phrase something. "You all right last night?" I laughed a little. "Yeah? Why?" He hesitated. "I don't want to sound weird, but you were standing in your yard around midnight. Just standing there." I stared at him. "No, I wasn't." "You were," he said quickly. "I was letting the dog out. You were barefoot in that gray hoodie you always wear, just looking up. I felt that cold, hollow feeling start in my stomach. I was asleep." He shrugged, uncomfortable now. "I figured you might have been sleepwalking or something. You didn't move the whole time I was out there. I said your name once. You didn't react." "How long was I out there?" I asked. "I don't know. A couple minutes, maybe. I went back inside because my dog was losing his mind." I forced a smile, told him it was probably nothing. Maybe I'd stepped out for air and forgot. He nodded, relieved to drop it, and went back inside. I got in my car and sat there with the door open, trying to slow my breathing. I lived alone. I didn't sleepwalk. I had never, ever gone outside in the middle of the night without remembering it. At work, I checked my phone. At 12:17 a.m., there was a location ping from my phone's history. Not a step count, not an app, just a dot on the map sitting exactly in the middle of my front yard. It stayed there until 12:29. 12 minutes. I stared at the screen until my eyes hurt. I checked my sleep tracker next. It showed uninterrupted sleep from 11:03 p.m. to 6:41 a.m. No wake events, no spikes. According to the data, I never left the bed. I tried to tell myself the GPS had glitched, that the ping was wrong, that Mark had mistaken someone else for me, but he'd known what I was wearing. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every small sound made me tense. I kept checking the time, then checking my bedroom door to make sure it was still locked. Around midnight, I sat up in bed and listened, half expecting to hear my own footsteps somewhere in the house. Nothing happened. The next morning, I felt stupid for being scared. I was exhausted, irritable. I almost deleted the location data. Instead, I took screenshots. Over the next week, nothing unusual happened. No more pings, no strange dreams, no neighbors asking questions. I started to relax just a little. Then on Thursday, my phone buzzed at 12:17 a.m. I was awake this time. I was lying on my side, scrolling through nothing in particular, when the vibration hit. One short buzz, like a notification that didn't quite come through. I unlocked my phone immediately. No alerts. I checked the clock. 12:18. My heart started to race. I stayed in bed, barely breathing, staring at the door. I told myself that if I didn't move, whatever had happened before couldn't happen again. At 12:29, my phone buzzed again. Same short vibration. I opened my location history with shaking fingers. Another ping. Same spot. Front yard. According to my phone, I'd been standing outside again. I didn't sleep at all after that. The next day, I installed a camera in my living room and one pointing at the front door. I set motion alerts. I even put a chair under the doorknob like I was a kid afraid of burglars. That night, at 12:16, my phone buzzed. I watched the camera feed on my screen. Nothing moved. At 12:17, the front door camera flickered, just for a fraction of a second. The feed went white, then returned to normal. No motion alert triggered. At 12:29, my phone buzzed again. I felt sick. The next morning, the camera logs showed no recorded movement, no door opening, no person entering or leaving. But the exterior camera had something else. At exactly 12:17 a.m., there was a single frame where the entire image was washed out like it had been overexposed. The house across the street disappeared into white. The sky looked flat and pale with no stars. One frame. Then normal again. I took the day off work. That afternoon, I walked my yard, looking for footprints or disturbed grass. There was nothing. The ground was dry and undisturbed. I stood where the ping said I'd been, right between the maple tree and the walkway. From there, I could see a wide stretch of sky above the neighborhood, unobstructed by trees or power lines. That night, I didn't stay in bed. I sat on the couch with the lights on, phone in hand, camera feed open. Midnight came and went without incident. I started to relax. At 12:16, every hair on my arm stood up. I didn't hear anything. I felt it, a subtle pressure, like a change in altitude. The room felt too quiet, like sound had been turned down slightly. My phone buzzed. 12:17. I was still on the couch. I hadn't moved. I checked the cameras. The front yard camera showed me standing there. I dropped the phone. I watched myself on the screen, barefoot, hoodie pulled tight, arms hanging at my sides. My head was tilted back, staring straight up. I wasn't blinking. The image was grainy, dark, but clear enough that there was no doubt it was me. The timestamp ticked forward. The version of me in the yard didn't move. Not even when a car passed and headlights washed over the lawn. The light bent around me strangely, like I was slightly out of focus. I picked the phone back up, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it again. The sky above my double looked wrong. Not dark, not starry, just dim, like something was blocking the depth of it. I forced myself to stand up. The moment I did, the camera feed glitched. The image smeared sideways for a split second. Then the yard was empty. My phone buzzed. 12:29. I didn't go outside, I didn't sleep. I sat there until sunrise with every light in the house on, watching the cameras like they might suddenly show me standing somewhere else. The next day, Mark didn't go to work. There was a police car in front of his house in the afternoon. I found out later that evening when his sister knocked on my door. They'd found him in his backyard that morning, barefoot, lying on his back in the grass. He was alive, conscious, but he couldn't explain why he was there. His phone showed a location ping at 12:17 a.m., same 12-minute gap. He didn't remember standing outside. He didn't remember seeing anything. He only remembered lying in bed and then waking up cold. I unplugged the cameras that night, turned my phone off completely, pulled the SIM card out and left it in the kitchen. It didn't matter. At 12:17, I woke up standing in my yard. I knew it before I opened my eyes. I could feel the damp grass under my feet, the night air against my skin, that pressure in my chest, steady and calm, like something heavy resting just above me. I opened my eyes. The sky wasn't dark. It wasn't bright either. It was a uniform, pale gray, stretching endlessly in every direction. No stars, no clouds, just depthless color. I didn't see anything else. No shapes, no lights, nothing to focus on. I had the overwhelming sense that I was being observed. Not by something nearby, by something vast and distant, like the sky itself was aware of me. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. When I woke up in my bed, it was morning. My phone was back on my nightstand, powered on, alarms intact. The location history showed another ping. I moved 2 weeks later. New house, new neighborhood. I don't talk to my neighbors. I don't go outside at night anymore. But sometimes, when I wake up just before dawn, my chest feels heavy, and the sky outside my window looks a little too pale. And I check the time. It's always close to 12:17. I was stopped at the red light on Hawthorne and 6th, the one by the old strip mall that never quite filled up again after the grocery store left. It was just after 7 p.m., early spring, still light out but flat looking, that in-between hour where everything feels muted. I remember because I'd just checked the clock on my dash and done the math on whether I had time to swing by my brother's place before heading home. I was sitting there with my foot on the brake, radio low, thinking about nothing in particular when the color drained out of everything. That's the only way I know how to describe it. The sky didn't go dark. It went dull, like someone turned the saturation knob all the way down. The blue flattened into this uniform gray, not stormy, not cloudy, just blank. The buildings, the cars, even the trees along the sidewalk all looked like they'd been photocopied. For half a second, I thought my eyes were doing something weird, like when you stand up too fast, then the light turned green. I realized I'd missed the change because the car behind me honked, short and annoyed. I looked down, then back up, and the color rushed back all at once. Blue sky, green trees, red brick, normal. I drove through the intersection on autopilot, heart thumping harder than it should have. I checked my mirrors. Everything looked fine. Traffic flowed the way it always did. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe glare, maybe fatigue. I worked IT support, spent too much time staring at screens. Eye strain made sense. Still, the rest of the drive felt off. Familiar streets felt slightly wrong, like the angles were different or the distances didn't line up the way my brain expected. I missed my turn once and had to loop back. When I got home, my brother Ethan texted asking if I was still coming over. I stared at the message longer than necessary before telling him I was too tired. That night, I dreamed about traffic lights. Not dramatic dreams, just standing at intersections, watching signals change, except every time the light switched, the world lost a little more color. By the end of the dream, everything was gray and silent, and I couldn't tell if the light was red or green anymore. I woke up before my alarm, unsettled but embarrassed by how much it stuck with me. The next few days were normal. I paid attention at lights without meaning to, checking the sky, watching reflections on car hoods. Nothing happened. By the end of the week, the memory had dulled enough that I could almost laugh at myself. Then, it happened again. Different intersection this time. Smaller. Residential. I was heading back from Ethan's place around 8:30, dusk settling in, streetlights just starting to come on. I stopped at a red light behind a white SUV. The moment my car came to a full stop, the world flattened. Same washed out gray. Same feeling of pressure, like the air had thickened slightly. I looked up immediately this time. The sky wasn't cloudy, it just wasn't colored. The streetlight above the intersection was on, but the light it cast looked wrong, dull and lifeless, like it was shining through fog that wasn't there. I looked down at the traffic signal. Red. I counted in my head. 1, 2. When I looked back up, the light was green. Color snapped back. The SUV ahead of me was already rolling forward. I hit the gas a second late, pulse racing. This time I knew I hadn't imagined it. At the next stop sign, I pulled over and put the car in park. I sat there with my hands on the wheel, breathing slowly, checking mirrors, checking the sky, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. When I got home, I wrote it down in my notes app. Just the facts. Time, location, what I saw. It felt stupid, but also necessary, like anchoring it to something real. Over the next month, it happened 4 more times. Always at a complete stop. Always brief. Always that same dull, drained gray. I never once saw the light change while the world was colorless. I only knew it had because it was green when the color came back. I started paying attention to the clock. The timestamps didn't line up. Once I was sure I'd only sat at the light for a few seconds. When I checked the dash clock afterward, 2 minutes had passed. Not enough to cause traffic to stack up, Not enough for anyone else to notice, just enough to make my stomach drop. I tried to talk myself out of it. Microsleeps, dissociation, stress. I Googled symptoms and immediately closed the browser because everything sounded like a diagnosis I didn't want. I told Ethan eventually. We were sitting in his garage, beers open, door halfway up. He listened without interrupting, then said, "So, like, your brain blanks out?" "I don't blank out," I said. "I'm there the whole time. It's just muted." "Do you lose time?" "I don't feel like I do, but the clocks say I might." He frowned. "That's not great." He suggested I see a doctor. I said I would. I didn't. A few weeks later, something new happened. I was stopped at a light downtown, later than usual, close to 10 p.m. The street was mostly empty. When the gray washed over everything, I noticed something I hadn't before. The sky wasn't uniform. Directly above the intersection, there was a faint, darker shape, barely visible against the washed-out gray. Not solid, more like a smudge or a shadow cast onto the sky itself. It didn't move. I felt that pressure again, heavier now, like my chest was being gently pressed from the inside. My ears rang softly. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. When the color came back, the shape was gone. The light was green. I drove home shaking. After that, the feeling followed me even when I wasn't driving. Standing in line at the store, I'd get this sense of things thinning, like reality was about to lose its grip on color again. It never did, but the anticipation was almost worse. I started avoiding certain routes, certain intersections. I planned my drives obsessively. It didn't matter. The last time it happened, I wasn't alone. Ethan was in the passenger seat. We were heading back from a late movie, talking about something stupid. I slowed for a red light near the river. Mid-sentence, he stopped talking. The world went gray. "Do you see that?" he asked quietly. My heart slammed into my ribs. "You see it too?" "Everything looks flat," he said, "like an old photo." I turned my head slowly. The darker patch in the sky was there again, more defined this time, hovering above the intersection like a stain. I watched the traffic light, red. I didn't blink. When color returned, Ethan sucked in a sharp breath. "The light's green. How long were we stopped?" "I don't know," I said. My voice sounded far away. We drove the rest of the way in silence. At his place, he checked his phone. The lock screen clock showed 9:58 p.m. His messages said the last one he'd sent was at 9:54. "I don't remember 4 minutes," he said. Neither did I. After that, it stopped. No more gray, no more pressure. Weeks passed, then months. Ethan stopped bringing it up. I stopped driving at night when I could avoid it. Sometimes, though, when I'm stopped at a light during the day, I swear the colors look a little too bright, like they're over-correcting. And every now and then when the light turns green, I realize I don't remember it ever being red. The compass started buzzing in my hand like a trapped insect. At first, I thought it was my imagination, or maybe my fingers were shaking from the cold. I stopped walking and held it out flat, waiting for the needle to settle. Instead, it quivered in place, a tight little vibration that I could feel through the metal casing. Then it snapped to a stop, pointing uphill. Not north, not anywhere that made sense, just straight up the trail. I stood there for a second, listening. The forest was quiet in that normal high-altitude way. No wind through the trees, no birds, no bugs. It was late morning, cloudy but bright, and cold enough that my breath showed when I exhaled. I was hiking alone near Monarch Pass, a trail I'd done before. Nothing technical, just a long, steady climb above tree line if you stuck with it. I'd planned to turn around before noon. I tapped the compass with my thumb. The needle didn't move. I pulled my phone out to check GPS, but there was no signal. That wasn't unusual up there, so I put it back in my pocket and told myself the compass was busted. Cheap gear, that's all. I started walking again. About 50 yards up the trail, I noticed the air ahead looked wrong. It wasn't fog. It wasn't dust. It looked like heat distortion, the kind you see over asphalt in summer, except it was March and cold enough that the ground was crusted with old snow in places. The shimmer hung just above the tree line, maybe 30 feet off the ground, stretching horizontally like a thin veil. The trees behind it looked slightly warped, like I was seeing them through moving glass. I slowed down without really deciding to. The trail was empty. No voices, no footsteps. I hadn't seen anyone else since the trailhead. I remember thinking it would make sense if there was wind up there. But there wasn't. My jacket hung still. The tops of the pines didn't move. I reached the spot where the compass had frozen and stopped again. The shimmering didn't move. It didn't pulse or glow. It was just there. Subtle enough that if I hadn't been looking straight at it, I might have missed it completely. I raised my hand and waved it slowly in front of my face, like I was checking for heat coming off a fire. Nothing. The air felt the same as everywhere else. Cold, thin, dry. I took another step. The sound stopped. I didn't notice it at first because it was the absence of something. No crunch of gravel under my boots. No rustle from my pack straps. Even my breathing sounded muffled, like my ears were clogged. I froze mid-step. The shimmer was closer now, or maybe I was. It was hard to judge distance. The trees behind it seemed flatter, less real, like a backdrop. I tried to swallow and felt the motion echo strangely in my head, like a delayed response. I took my phone out again. Still no signal, but the screen lit up. The time read 11:42. I blinked and checked again. Same time. I don't know why that bothered me as much as it did. I hadn't been hiking that long, but it felt like more than a few minutes had passed since I last checked. I turned around. The trail behind me looked normal. Same trees, same rocks, same gentle curve down toward the valley. Sound existed back there. I could hear my own breath again, faint but present. I took one step backward. The sound came back fully, like someone had turned the volume knob back up. Wind whispered through the trees. A bird called somewhere far off. Gravel crunched under my boot. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the line in the air. I told myself it was some kind of atmospheric thing, temperature inversion, light refraction, something boring and explainable that I just didn't understand. I took another step forward. The silence snapped back instantly. This time, I felt something else, a low pressure in my chest, not painful, just present, like standing too close to heavy machinery or being inside a large building when the HVAC kicks on. The shimmer thickened slightly, not brighter, just more defined. I had the sudden, very clear thought that if I took one more step, I wouldn't be able to step back. I don't know where that thought came from. It didn't feel like panic. It felt calm, observational, like a fact. My compass buzzed again in my hand, even though I hadn't realized I was still holding it. I looked down. The needle wasn't vibrating anymore. It was perfectly still, pointing straight ahead, up the mountain. I don't remember deciding to turn around. I just did it. One smooth movement, careful not to look back again. As soon as my back was to it, the pressure eased. Sound returned completely. My heart was hammering now, and my hands felt shaky and weak. I walked downhill fast, but not running. I kept expecting to hear something behind me. Footsteps. A voice. Anything. There was nothing. After a few minutes, I checked my phone again. 11:42. That's when the fear really hit. I stood there on the trail, staring at the screen. The seconds weren't ticking. The display was frozen, just like the compass had been. I turned the phone off and back on. When it rebooted, the time jumped to 12:19. I felt dizzy, like I'd stood up too fast. The rest of the hike down was uneventful, but everything felt slightly off. The colors seemed flatter, the sky looked too close. I kept checking over my shoulder, half expecting to see that shimmer following me through the trees. At the trailhead, there were cars parked that hadn't been there earlier. A couple unloading gear, a man tightening his boots. Normal stuff. The sound of voices felt grounding in a way I didn't realize I needed. I almost asked someone if they'd seen anything strange up the trail. I didn't. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with notifications that had apparently been waiting. Missed texts. A voicemail from my sister asking how the hike was going. When I got home, I noticed my boots were dusty, but the laces were wet, like I had been standing in damp grass. There hadn't been any wet ground on the trail. That night, I dreamed about standing on the mountain, looking up at a sky with no depth, just a smooth, pale surface stretching forever. When I woke up, my chest felt heavy, like it had when I'd stepped toward the shimmer. I checked my compass before bed the next night. The needle spun freely, like normal. I haven't gone back to that trail. Sometimes when I'm outside on cold, clear days, I catch myself scanning the tree line without meaning to, looking for that slight distortion in the air. And every now and then, when the wind drops just right, the world goes very quiet for half a second longer than it should. When that happens, I don't move until the sound comes back. The vibrations started while I was lying on my couch, half watching a cooking show and scrolling through my phone. At first, I thought it was the building. I lived in a small second-floor apartment above a dry cleaner, and sometimes the machines downstairs made the walls hum. It wasn't loud, though. I didn't really hear it so much as feel it, like a low buzz pressing gently into my chest and shoulders. I shifted on the couch, thinking maybe my phone was vibrating under me. It wasn't. It was in my hand, screen dark. The TV audio kept playing, but it sounded thin, like the bass had dropped out. I turned the volume up a notch, then back down. The vibration stayed the same. I sat up. The feeling got stronger. It was steady, not pulsing. A flat, even pressure. The kind you feel standing near a transformer or a big generator, except there was nothing like that anywhere near my place. I held my breath and focused. No rattling dishes, no shaking lights, just that low, heavy presence in the room, like the air itself was vibrating. I checked the time. 9:17 p.m. Outside, the street was quiet, a couple parked cars, the glow from the street lamp across the road. Nothing unusual. I stood up, and the vibration followed me. That's when I realized it wasn't coming from the building. It wasn't coming from any direction I could point to. It felt like it was everywhere at once. I walked into the kitchen. Same thing. Bathroom. Same thing. Bedroom. Same thing. It didn't get louder or quieter. It didn't change at all, no matter where I went. It just sat there, pressing gently but insistently into my body. I thought about calling someone, but I didn't know what I'd even say. Hey, does the air feel weird to you? Didn't seem like a great opener. I went back to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. My chest felt tight, not painful, just compressed. My breathing felt shallow even though I wasn't panicking yet. I looked at the window again. That's when I noticed the streetlight wasn't flickering, but it wasn't steady either. The light looked slightly blurred, like I was seeing it through water. The edges of the parked cars underneath it seemed soft, less defined. I rubbed my eyes hard and looked again. Same thing. The vibration deepened. Still not louder, just fuller. Like more of me was inside it. My ears popped suddenly, the way they do in an airplane, except sharper. A split second later, the vibration stopped. The silence afterward was overwhelming. It wasn't just quiet. It felt like sound had been turned off and then slowly turned back on again. My ears rang hard, a high-pitched tone that made me wince and clap my hands over them. I waited for the hum to come back. It didn't. I stayed there, frozen, listening to the ringing fade. The normal sounds of my apartment returned in layers. The fridge kicking on, the TV murmuring, a car passing outside. Everything looked normal again. I checked the time, 9:17 p.m. The exact same minute, that's when my stomach dropped. I unlocked my phone and scrolled through my messages. There was a text from my neighbor, Jess, sent at 9:24. Hey, did you just feel that? Thought there was an earthquake or something. I stared at the timestamp. 9:24, I typed back, feel what? She didn't respond. I stood up and went to the window again. The street looked normal, but something about it felt wrong now. Too still, like a set waiting for actors. I noticed that the porch light across the street was on. It usually wasn't. I leaned closer to the glass. The light flicked off, not gradually, just off. Then the one next to it went off. Then another, moving down the block in a straight line, one by one. I felt that pressure in my chest again, faint but growing. Before I could step back, every light on the street went dark at once. Street lights, porch lights, everything. The ringing in my ears came back, quieter than before, but sharper, like feedback. I backed away from the window. The vibration didn't return, but I could feel something else now. A sense of weight above me, like the ceiling had dropped a few inches closer to my head. I don't know why I looked up. There was nothing there but drywall and a faint water stain. Then the lights came back on. All at once, no flicker. The pressure vanished. I stood there shaking, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I checked my phone again, 9:26. This time it changed when I blinked. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time the building creaked, I sat up, waiting for the hum to come back. It didn't. The next morning, Jess knocked on my door. She looked tired, pale. You hear anything weird last night? She asked. I told her about the vibration, the lights, the ringing. She frowned. I was lying in bed when it happened, thought a truck was idling outside or something. Then my ears popped, and it was gone. I asked her what time. She said, around 9:15, maybe a little after. Later that day, I checked the breaker panel. Everything was fine. I called the power company. They had no record of an outage. I even went downstairs and asked the owner of the dry cleaner if they'd been running new equipment. He looked confused and said they closed at 6. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next few weeks, I noticed small things. My ears would ring randomly, always at night. Sometimes I'd feel that same chest pressure for a few seconds, then nothing. Once, while lying on the couch again, I felt the vibrations start, but it faded before it fully formed, like it changed its mind. I started checking the time obsessively when it happened. It never lined up the same way twice. One night, I woke up just after midnight with my heart racing and that familiar pressure in my chest. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, afraid to move. The vibration didn't come. Instead, my ears popped again, gently this time. The room felt larger afterward, like the walls had shifted outward slightly. In the morning, I found my phone on the kitchen counter. I don't remember leaving it there. The activity log showed steps recorded between 12:03 and 12:11 a.m. I live alone. I still sit on that couch most nights. I still watch TV and scroll my phone. Sometimes when everything gets very quiet and my chest feels tight for no clear reason, I hold my breath and wait. So far, whatever it was hasn't fully come back. But every now and then, right before the ringing starts, I get the sense that the air around me is listening. The power went out at 8:43 p.m. exactly. I knew because my oven clock blinked off and I was standing right there pouring pasta into a pot when the kitchen went dark. Not a flicker. Just gone. The hum of the fridge stopped mid-note, like someone cut a wire with scissors. I stood there for a second, holding the box, waiting for the lights to come back. They didn't. I looked out the window over the sink. The houses across the street were dark too. Porch lights off. Street lights off. The whole block looked flat and empty, like a photo that hadn't loaded yet. There wasn't any weather, no wind, no rain. The sky had been clear all day, warm for early fall. I remember thinking it was weird for the power to go out on a night like that. I set the pasta down and grabbed my phone from the counter. No signal issues. A couple texts came through at the same time. One from my sister, Mara. Did your power just go out? One from my neighbor, Kyle, 2 doors down. Lights out for you too? I texted both back yes. No explanation, just yes. I went to the living room and lit a candle from the junk drawer. The flame looked steady, no drafts. The house felt heavier without the usual background noise. No AC, no fridge, no distant TV sounds bleeding through walls. Just quiet. I checked the time again, 8:45. I sat on the couch and waited. I figured it would come back in a minute or two. It usually did. That's when I noticed the clouds. I hadn't realized it had clouded over at all. When I looked up through the front window, the sky was covered in a smooth layer of low clouds. Not storm clouds. No texture to them. Just a flat gray ceiling. Then they lit up. It wasn't bright. Not like lightning. More like someone slowly turned on a dim light behind them. The clouds took on this dull, pale glow. Almost white, but not quite. It reminded me of the way the sky looks during a full moon, except there was no moon out. I'd checked earlier. The glow spread evenly, like it wasn't coming from any one point. The whole patch of sky above the street just brightened. I stood up without realizing I was doing it. I waited for thunder. Nothing. The glow held for maybe 3 seconds. Long enough for my brain to register that it wasn't normal. Long enough for my stomach to start tightening. Then it faded. Not suddenly. Just eased back to dark, like someone turned the dimmer down. The street stayed silent. No thunder, no rain, no flicker of lightning after. I realized my candle flame hadn't reacted at all. No movement, no change. I walked to the front door and opened it. Kyle was already outside, standing on his porch in socks and a hoodie, looking up. Across the street, Mrs. Henson had her door open too. She was holding her phone up like she'd been recording, but her screen was dark. "Did you see that?" Kyle asked without looking at me. I said yes. "What the hell was that?" he said. "I don't know," I said. My voice sounded too loud. A few more doors opened down the block. People stepped out onto porches and driveways. Everyone was looking up at the same part of the sky. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else said it was probably lightning behind the clouds. But no one sounded convinced. I checked my phone again. No weather alerts, no emergency notifications. Just a missed call from my mom that came through late. I tried calling her back. It rang, then went to voicemail. While we were standing there, the power came back on. Every house lit up at once. Street lights, porch lights, everything. No flicker, just on. A few people clapped, like that settled it. Kyle exhaled and laughed, rubbing his hands together. Probably just a transformer or something, he said. Yeah, I said, even though I didn't know why clouds would glow because of that. Right, everyone drifted back inside. Doors closed. The street went back to normal. I went back in too, but I didn't feel settled. The house felt different now. Not wrong, exactly. Just thinner, like the walls weren't doing as much as they used to. I finished cooking, but I didn't really taste the food. I kept replaying the glow in my head, how even it had been, how quiet. At 9:12, my phone buzzed with a text from Mara. Okay, this is weird, but did the sky look bright where you are for a sec? I called her instead of texting back. She answered right away. Tell me you saw it too. I told her everything. The timing, the glow. No thunder. She went quiet for a moment, then said, I'm in my backyard. It's clear here. No clouds, but the sky still looked wrong, like it was lit up without a source. That part stuck with me. After we hung up, I walked through the house checking lights, outlets, appliances. Everything worked fine. The clocks had reset, but that was it. Before bed, I stepped outside again. The clouds were still there, darker now, no glow, just a normal, overcast sky. Crickets had started up again, loud and steady. I stood on the porch for a while, listening. That night, I woke up at 2:18 a.m. for no reason I could pinpoint. My room was dark, but not as dark as it should have been. There was a faint grayness to the air, like early morning light, except it was the middle of the night. I held my breath and listened. No hum, no vibration, just quiet. I checked my phone. No notifications, no missed calls. The sky outside my bedroom window looked normal again. Dark, flat. In the morning, the local utility company posted a short update online. Brief outage affecting several neighborhoods. Cause under investigation. No mention of weather. No mention of unusual activity. Over the next few days, I asked around. Some people noticed the glow, some didn't. A couple said they'd been inside and only realized something happened when their clocks blinked. Mrs. Henson said she checked her phone video later. The recording cut out right when the sky brightened. Just a frozen frame and then black. Kyle said his security camera didn't capture anything either. It logged a motion event at 8:44, but the clip was empty. A week later, the power went out again. This time, it was only for about 10 seconds. I was in the shower when it happened. The bathroom went dark, and through the frosted window, I saw the same pale light wash over the glass. I didn't wait to see it fade. I shut off the water and stood there, heart racing, counting under my breath. When the lights came back, I checked the time. 8:43 p.m. Same minute. Since then, I've started paying attention to the sky more than I ever used to, especially on quiet nights when there's no weather and no reason for anything to happen. So far, it hasn't happened again. But sometimes when the house is still and the lights are on and everything feels normal, I catch myself waiting for the glow. The first thing I noticed was the brake lights. I was driving east on Route 22, the stretch that cuts through farmland and low hills before you hit the river towns. It was late but not fully dark yet, that in-between time where the sky still held some color but the road felt empty. I'd left work late, missed dinner, and just wanted to get home. No music on, just the sound of tires and the occasional passing truck. There were maybe a dozen cars ahead of me, spread out, all moving at a steady speed. No congestion, no reason to slow down. Then, all at once, every red light flared, not gradually, not one after another. Every single car ahead of me hit their brakes at the same moment. I pressed mine too, more out of instinct than understanding. My coffee sloshed in the cup holder. The nose of my car dipped, and I remember thinking there must have been a deer or an accident up ahead, something I couldn't see yet. But there was nothing on the road. We slowed from about 65 down to maybe 30 in a few seconds, all of us still moving, just hesitant. Nobody honked, nobody swerved. It was like the entire line of traffic had the same thought at the same time. I leaned forward in my seat, squinting through the windshield. That's when I saw the light. It wasn't bright. Not like headlights or a flare. It was dull, almost matte, like a soft glow without a source. It hovered above the road. It centered over the right lane, maybe 50 yards ahead of the lead car. It didn't cast light on the pavement. The asphalt underneath looked the same. No reflection, no shadows. The light was there for less than a second, just long enough for my brain to register it as something that shouldn't be there. Then it vanished. Not shooting off, not fading, just gone. At the exact same moment, every brake light ahead of me turned off. Traffic sped back up like nothing had happened. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until my chest burned and I let it out. I checked my mirrors. The car behind me was right on my bumper now, like they'd been just as confused as I was. I could see the driver's face in my rear view, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. I looked back at the road. Everything was normal again. The sky looked the same. No aircraft, no streetlights in that stretch. So nothing obvious could have caused a reflection. My hands felt tight on the steering wheel. A mile later, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. I ignored it at first, focusing on the road, but when it buzzed again, I glanced down at the screen at the next straightaway. Text from Dan. You see that? Dan worked in the same building as me. He lived a few exits past mine and usually took the same route home. I called him instead of replying. He answered immediately. Tell me you saw that too. I think so, I said. My voice sounded thin. Everyone slowed down. There was something above the road. Yeah, he said quickly. Yeah, that light. I thought I was losing it. Why did everyone brake? I asked. Did you see anything else? No, he said. That's the thing. I didn't even think. I just hit the brakes. Everyone did. We drove in silence for a few seconds, still on the phone. Did it look flat to you? He asked. Like it wasn't really glowing, just kind of there? That's exactly it, I said, past another pause. You want to grab a beer? He asked. I don't really feel like going straight home. I agreed without thinking about it. We pulled into a small bar near the river, the kind with a gravel lot and a flickering neon sign. Inside, the TV was on low, and a handful of people sat scattered at tables. Dan was already there when I walked in. He looked rattled. We didn't even talk much at first. Just ordered drinks and sat there, both of us replaying it in our heads. A couple at the bar was talking about traffic on Route 22. I caught fragments. Everyone just slowed down, thought there was a wreck. Did you see that light? I turned slightly in my chair. One of the guys noticed and asked, you were out there too? We nodded. He shook his head. Weirdest thing I've seen in a while. How long did you see it? Dan asked. The guy frowned. Barely at all. Blink and you miss it. That was the same answer everyone gave. No one could describe it exactly. Some said it was round. Some said it was stretched like a smudge. One woman said she didn't see anything but still slammed on her brakes like everyone else. That's what freaks me out, she said. Why did I slow down? I drove home later than I planned. The road was empty by then. I kept expecting to see the light again, but the highway stayed dark and normal. When I got home, my neighbor Rachel was outside smoking on her porch. You take the long way home? She asked. Yeah, I said. Did you hear about that thing on the highway? She nodded slowly. My sister called me about it, said traffic just reacted. I went inside, locked the door, and stood there longer than necessary, listening to the house settle. That night, I slept badly. I kept waking up with the sense that I'd missed something important. The next morning, local news mentioned a brief, unexplained slowdown due to possible debris or wildlife. No footage, no explanation beyond that. But over the next few days, I started noticing small things. When I drove that stretch of road again, my speedometer dipped for a split second right where it happened, like my foot eased off the gas without me doing it. I tested it the next day, paying close attention. Same thing. My phone's navigation app showed a delay of exactly 40 seconds along that mile, even when traffic was clear. Dan texted me later that week. You ever feel like something's watching the road? I stared at that message longer than I should have. A week after the incident, I drove the route again at almost the same time. Dusk. Same soft light in the sky, same quiet. I told myself nothing would happen. As I approached the spot, my radio cut to static for half a second. Just a soft hiss, then back to normal. My heart started racing. Nothing appeared this time. No light, no braking cars. But when I got home, my car's clock was 3 minutes ahead of my phone. I checked it twice, then again the next morning. It stayed that way. Dan stopped taking Route 22 altogether. I still drive it. I don't know why. Maybe part of me wants to see it again, or maybe I just want proof that it was real and not some shared moment of collective misfiring. Every now and then, when traffic ahead of me slows for no reason, my chest tightens. But so far, nothing else has appeared. Just the road, the cars, and that brief second where everyone seemed to know something I still can't explain. I woke up already sitting halfway up in bed, heart going hard like I'd been running. The room was dark and quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear your own breathing too clearly. I had that exact feeling you get when you're sure someone's in the room with you, even though you can't see anything. I stayed still and listened. Nothing moved. No floorboards, no doors. The house was the same as it always was at night, old, creaky, and settled. But the feeling didn't go away. It was strong enough that my eyes kept drifting to the corner near the dresser, like I expected something to step out of it. I turned my head toward the window instead. That's when I noticed the light. It wasn't bright. It wasn't even clearly defined, just a faint glow outside, low to the ground, like someone holding a dim lantern far away. It sat just beyond the tree line at the back of my property, barely visible through the branches. As soon as I focused on it, it moved. Not fast. It slid sideways and dipped like it was backing away. By the time I swung my legs off the bed and crossed the room, it was already retreating behind the trees, shrinking until it was gone. I pressed my face close to the glass and scanned the yard. Nothing. No flashlights. No headlights. No movement in the brush. The trees stood still, their outlines sharp against the sky. I checked the time on my phone. 3:41 a.m. I stood there longer than I meant to, waiting for something else to happen. It didn't. By the time I went back to bed, the feeling had dulled but not disappeared. I slept in short, shallow stretches until my alarm went off. In the morning, the yard looked normal. Dew on the grass, fallen leaves along the fence line. I walked the perimeter with a mug of coffee, half expecting to find footprints or some sign that someone had been back there. There was nothing. I live alone on a few acres outside a small town in western Pennsylvania. My nearest neighbor, Mark, is about a quarter mile down the road. We wave when we see each other, borrow tools once in a while. That's it. I told myself it was probably a car on the road beyond the woods, or my brain filling in gaps after a bad dream. That explanation worked until the next night. The second night, I didn't wake up suddenly. I drifted out of sleep slowly, aware first of a low pressure in my ears, like the start of a headache. Then the same feeling crept in, that sense of being watched. I didn't move right away. I kept my eyes closed, listening. That's when I noticed the sound was wrong. Not silence, something softer, like the house had been wrapped in insulation. The usual background noise, distant highway hum, insects, the refrigerator cycling, was muted, flattened. I opened my eyes and turned my head toward the window. The glow was back. This time it was a little higher, hovering just above the tree line. Still dim, still without any clear source. It pulsed once, faintly, like a slow breath. I got out of bed faster than I meant to and crossed the room. The floor creaked loudly under my feet, and the sound seemed to snap the moment in half. The light dropped straight down and vanished behind the trees. Immediately, the night sounds rushed back in. Crickets, wind, the distant bark of a dog. I stood there with my hands on the window frame, trying to steady my breathing. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. I work at a small print shop in town, mostly alone in the afternoons. Every time a machine kicked on behind me, I flinched. I checked my phone more than usual, half expecting a missed call or message explaining something I didn't understand yet. I didn't tell anyone. Saying it out loud felt like giving it more weight. That night, I stayed up later than usual. I watched TV with the lights on and didn't go to bed until after midnight. When I finally did fall asleep, it was deep and heavy. I woke again at 3:41. The number hit me immediately. Same time. This time the light was closer. It hovered between two trees at the edge of the yard, low enough that I could make out the way it blurred slightly against the branches behind it. It didn't pulse, it just hung there. My chest felt tight, like I'd run out of room to breathe. I raised my phone and snapped a photo through the glass. The screen showed nothing but darkness. When I looked back up, the light slid backward, slow and smooth until the trees swallowed it. I didn't sleep after that. The following morning, Mark drove up while I was taking out the trash. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Lights were on late." "Yeah," I said automatically. "Just couldn't sleep." He hesitated. You been seeing anything weird back here at night? My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I asked. He scratched his beard. A couple nights ago, I let my dog out and thought I saw a glow near your trees. Figured it was you. I didn't answer right away. I could hear my pulse in my ears. It wasn't, I said finally. He nodded slowly. Yeah, that's what I figured. After that, the nights changed. Sometimes I didn't wake up at all. Other times I woke with that pressure in my ears, but no light outside. Once I woke to find my phone unlocked on the nightstand, camera app open, pointed at the ceiling. The light came back 3 more times that week, always around the same time, always retreating as soon as I moved. One night I stepped outside. The air felt thick, like it had weight. The yard was darker than usual. The stars dimmed above my house, but brighter farther away. I stood barefoot in the grass, heart pounding, and waited. Nothing appeared. After a minute, the pressure in my ears eased. The stars returned to normal. I went back inside, shaking. The light never crossed into the yard. It never approached the house. It stayed just far enough away to be seen, then gone. A week later, it stopped. No light, no pressure, no waking at 3:41. Life slid back into place. Work, sleep, quiet nights. Sometimes when I stand at the window before bed, I look toward the trees and feel that old sense of attention brush past me, faint and fleeting. Nothing shows itself anymore. But every so often, I wake just before dawn with the feeling that something has finished watching and finally left. I was parked on the side of Route 95 about 30 miles north of Beatty, Nevada, with the engine off and the windows down, filming the sky because I couldn't sleep and there was nothing else to do out there. It was just after midnight. The air was still warm from the day, and the desert had that quiet that feels deliberate, like everything's holding its breath. I'd driven out there a lot before. There's a dirt turnout I liked because it's far enough from the road that headlights don't ruin your night vision, but close enough that you don't feel completely stupid being alone. I'd brought a cheap tripod, my phone, and a thermos of coffee. No big plan. I just wanted to catch some long shots of the stars and maybe a satellite passing through. I set the phone up, hit record, and sat on the hood of my car watching the same patch of sky I was filming. Orion was low, the Milky Way faint but visible. Everything looked normal. About 5 minutes in, I checked the screen just to make sure the phone hadn't shut off or overheated. It was still recording, nothing unusual. I kept watching the sky with my own eyes. No movement, no flashes, just stars doing what stars do. When I stopped the recording and scrubbed back through it, I almost missed it. About 2 minutes into the video, something moved across the frame. Not fast, not bright. It looked like the stars themselves warped, like someone dragged a thumb lightly across glass. The distortion passed smoothly from left to right, bending the star field for maybe half a second, then everything snapped back into place. I replayed it 3 times. I hadn't seen anything when it happened. I was staring straight at that part of the sky. I zoomed in. The image broke down into grain, but the distortion was still there. It wasn't compression or a glitch I recognized. The stars didn't blur. They curved, like they were being viewed through uneven air. I checked the rest of the video. Nothing else. I told myself it was a camera artifact. Heat shimmer. Software hiccup. Phones do weird things in low light. Still, I recorded another clip. This time, I watched the phone screen instead of the sky. I wanted to catch it in the moment if it happened again. Nothing did. I switched angles, pointing the camera slightly higher, then lower. I filmed in shorter bursts, 10 seconds, 20, a minute. On the 4th clip, it happened again. I didn't see it live, but when I reviewed the footage, the same distortion crossed the frame, same direction, same smooth motion, same length of time. It didn't line up with clouds, there were none. It didn't match any satellite path I knew. It wasn't straight like an aircraft, it wasn't blinking. It was just wrong. I checked the timestamp. Both distortions happened at 12:47 a.m. That made me uneasy in a way I couldn't explain. I stayed another hour filming on and off. Nothing else showed up. The sky stayed perfectly normal, both on screen and in person. I drove home around 2, feeling stupid for letting myself get worked up. The next day, I showed the clip to my coworker Evan during lunch. He squinted at my phone, shrugged, and said, "Looks like a lens issue." "What kind?" I asked. "No idea. Phones aren't meant for that kind of light," he said, already moving on. That should have been the end of it. But the next night, I went back. I told myself it was just curiosity, but that wasn't true. I felt pulled, like I'd left something unfinished out there. This time, I brought a real camera, an old DSLR I used to take landscape shots. I mounted it on the tripod, set it to long exposure, and aimed it at the same section of sky. The desert felt different that night. Not dangerous. Just empty in a way that made sound feel out of place. Even my footsteps on gravel seemed too loud. I started recording and sat back. I watched the sky, I watched the camera, I checked my watch. 12:46 a.m. I felt a faint pressure in my ears, like a change in altitude. I swallowed a few times, annoyed. 12:47. Nothing happened. No distortion, no movement, no flicker. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and felt embarrassed with myself. When I reviewed the footage later, my hands started shaking. The distortion was there. It didn't look the same as on the phone. It was subtler, like a ripple passing through clear water. The stars bent inward slightly, then eased back out. Again, it crossed the frame smoothly. Again, it lasted less than a second. Again, I hadn't seen it. I packed up fast after that. I didn't feel scared exactly, but I had a strong sense that staying longer was a bad idea, like lingering too close to a moving road at night. On the drive home, my radio picked up a low hum between stations. I turned it off. The next few days, I didn't sleep well. I kept thinking about the footage, replaying it in my head. I watched it frame by frame on my laptop. There were no artifacts leading in or out, no digital tearing. Just a clean, smooth distortion that affected only the stars, not the background noise of the image. On the third night, I noticed something else. The timestamp on the DSLR footage was off by 4 minutes. I checked the camera clock. It was set correctly. I checked the file properties. Same discrepancy. My phone video from the first night had the same gap. I went back a third time. I don't know why. This time I didn't bring the camera. I brought a folding chair and a flashlight and sat in the dark with my hands in my pockets, watching the sky with my own eyes. 12:46 came and went. 12:47 passed. Nothing happened. I stayed until almost 1, feeling foolish and relieved at the same time. As I stood up to leave, I noticed the stars above the road looked off. Not dimmer, not brighter. Just slightly out of place, like the sky was misaligned by a fraction of a degree. I blinked hard. Everything snapped back to normal. The pressure in my ears faded. I drove home without stopping. After that, things settled down. No more distortions, no weird footage, no radio hum. A week later, I checked the old files again. The distortions were still there, exactly as before. I never caught anything with my eyes, not once. That's the part that sticks with me. Whatever moved across the sky didn't announce itself. It didn't glow or flash or make noise. It just passed through the stars quietly enough that only the camera noticed. Sometimes I wonder how often it happens. How many times something crosses overhead while everyone's looking right at it and seeing nothing at all. I haven't gone back to that turnout since. I still film the sky sometimes, but I do it closer to town now, where the lights wash everything out a little. I don't check the timestamps as closely anymore. I first noticed the clicking halfway down Alder Street, walking home from the late shift with my jacket unzipped and my phone dead. It was a quiet, regular sound, like someone tapping a pen against plastic. Not loud enough to place, just enough to be annoying. I stopped to adjust my bag. The clicking stopped too. I stood there for a second, listening. Wind moved through the trees. A car passed a few blocks away. Nothing else. I took a step forward. The clicking came back. It wasn't echoing. It didn't bounce off buildings. It felt close but not directional, like it was coming from everywhere at once. I glanced over my shoulder. The sidewalk behind me was empty, just wet concrete reflecting the streetlights. I walked faster. The clicking matched my pace, not step for step, but close. When I slowed, it slowed. When I stopped again, it cut out instantly. I laughed under my breath, more reflex than humor, and stepped under the next streetlight. Silence. Not just the clicking. Everything seemed quieter under the light, like the air itself had dampened. My ears rang faintly, the way they do after a loud noise, even though there hadn't been one. I moved out of the light. Click. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the street. Parked cars, closed storefronts. A bus stop bench with a torn ad flapping slightly. Nothing that could explain the sound. I pulled my keys out, letting them jangle deliberately. The clicking didn't change. I kept walking, counting the streetlights ahead of me. 4 more to my block. I told myself it was someone's headphones leaking sound, or a loose sign, or my own shoes on the pavement doing something weird. The problem was that the sound didn't come from the ground. It felt higher, like chest level or above. Halfway to the next light, the clicking sped up, not frantic, just faster, like it was keeping up with a new rhythm I wasn't aware of. I stepped into the light. Gone. I stood directly under it, heart beating harder than it should have been, and waited. The bulb hummed faintly overhead. The light didn't flicker. The clicking didn't return. I stepped back. Click. That was when I realized it wasn't following me exactly. It was staying just outside the light, like it couldn't or wouldn't cross into it. I walked from one pool of light to the next, testing it. Each time I stepped into brightness, the clicking stopped. Each time I moved back into shadow, it returned, always at the same distance, always just out of reach. I tried something stupid. I turned around suddenly and walked backward into the dark, staring hard at the empty space behind me. The clicking continued, steady and patient. I couldn't see anything. No movement, no shape, just darkness between the streetlights. At the corner, I fumbled my phone back to life with a portable charger. It booted slowly, the screen too bright. I turned on the flashlight and swept it across the sidewalk. Nothing. The clicking didn't react to the beam at all. I checked the time. 11:38 p.m. I crossed the street early, staying under the lights even though it added distance. The clicking stayed with me, always starting again the moment I left the glow. A woman stepped out of an apartment building ahead of me, locking her door. The clicking stopped before I reached her. I almost said something. Almost asked if she heard it too, but the look on her face was tired and closed off, and the quiet under the streetlight felt fragile, like breaking it would be a mistake. I walked past her. As soon as I did, the clicking came back, louder now, closer. My building was 2 blocks away. I could see the porch light glowing faintly at the end of the street. I tried to call my roommate, Jonah. The call rang, then dropped. No signal. The clicking changed again, the intervals tightening like something being wound. I broke into a jog. The sound kept pace easily. At the last intersection, the streetlight flickered as I stepped beneath it. The clicking cut out so abruptly it felt like pressure releasing in my head. My ears popped. For a split second, I thought I saw something move at the edge of the light. Not a shape, more like a distortion, the way heat warps air above asphalt. Then the light stabilized. I didn't move until my breathing slowed. When I stepped out again, the clicking resumed immediately. It felt closer than ever, like it was right behind my shoulder. I didn't turn around. I sprinted the last half block, fumbling with my keys, nearly dropping them. The porch light was weak, barely more than a suggestion, but it was light. The clicking stopped as I stepped onto the concrete. I unlocked the door and got inside fast, slamming it behind me and locking it twice. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The fridge hum sounded distant, like it was in another room entirely. Jonah was asleep on the couch, TV paused on a menu screen. I stood there for a full minute, listening. No clicking. I went to the window and pulled the curtain back a few inches. The street was empty. The porch light cast a shallow pool on the sidewalk. Beyond it, darkness stretched between streetlights like usual. Something clicked once, softly, from somewhere just beyond the edge of the light. I dropped the curtain. That night, I barely slept. Every small noise snapped me awake. Pipes. Wind. The building settling. Nothing matched the sound exactly, but everything reminded me of it. The next day, I walked the same route in daylight. No clicking. No odd silence under the streetlights. Everything looked normal, even boring. I told Jonah about it over coffee. He listened, nodding, then said, probably a loose sign or something. Sound travels weird at night. I wanted that to be true. The following week, I avoided walking home late. I took the bus, paid for rides, rearranged shifts. One night, I had no choice. It was misting, the streets slick and reflective. The clicking started almost immediately when I left the bus stop. It was already fast. I walked under the first streetlight and felt that same pressure release, that same unnatural quiet. This time, I didn't step back into the dark. I stayed under the light and waited. The clicking continued for several seconds longer than before, just beyond the glow, uneven now, like it was testing something. Then it stopped on its own. I stood there until the mist soaked through my jacket. When I finally moved, I stayed in the light the whole way home, crossing early, doubling back if I had to. The clicking never returned. I still don't know what made the sound. I don't know why it stopped under the lights or why it felt aware of my movement without ever showing itself. Sometimes, when I'm walking at night and a streetlight goes out ahead of me, I wait for it to come back on before moving forward. So far, it always has. I was sitting on the back steps with a mug of coffee, watching the horizon because I couldn't sleep. It was too early for sunrise, still an hour at least, but the sky had that faint pre-dawn gray that makes everything look unfinished. The air was cold enough that my breath showed, and the yard smelled like wet dirt and old leaves. That was when the horizon started to glow. At first, I thought my eyes were just adjusting, or that maybe the sun was coming up earlier than I realized. The glow wasn't orange or pink like a normal sunrise. It was pale, almost white, spread thin and even, like someone had turned on a dim light behind the hills. It sat low just above the tree line, and it was steady. No flicker, no color. I checked my phone, 4:47 a.m. I stared at the glow and waited for it to change, to warm up or climb higher. It didn't. It just sat there, flat and calm, bright enough that the silhouettes of the trees sharpened against it. The birds didn't react. No early chirping, no sudden movement. Everything stayed quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like the world was holding still. Then the glow moved. It didn't spread or brighten. It lifted, slowly, smoothly, like a curtain being pulled upward. The light peeled away from the horizon and rose into the sky, keeping the same shape, the same brightness, just climbing straight up. The land beneath it dropped back into darkness as it passed, the hills and trees fading into shadow again. I stood up without realizing I was doing it. My coffee spilled down the steps, steam rising from the splash, and I didn't even look at it. The glow kept rising. It didn't cast light on the clouds because there were no clouds. It didn't reflect off anything. It was just there, hovering now, no longer connected to the horizon at all. And then it was gone. Not fading, not dimming, just gone, like someone had switched it off. The sky snapped back to its normal pre-dawn darkness, stars visible again where the glow had been. I stood there with my hands clenched at my sides, waiting for something else to happen. A sound, a feeling, anything. Nothing did. The cold felt sharper after that, like I'd just stepped outside from a warm room, even though I'd been out there the whole time. The quiet felt heavier. I realized my ears were ringing slightly, not the way they do after a sudden change in pressure. I checked my phone again, 4:49 a.m., 2 minutes had passed. It felt longer. I stayed outside until the actual sunrise, which came when it was supposed to. Slow and orange and familiar. By then, my coffee was cold and my hands were numb. I kept replaying the way the light had lifted, straight up, clean and controlled. Later that morning, I mentioned it to my neighbor Ron when he walked his dog past my fence. He squinted at the sky like he might still see something there and said maybe it was a weird reflection from the highway, even though the highway was miles away and below the hills. That night, I sat outside again. I told myself I was just enjoying the quiet. The truth was I was waiting. Nothing happened the first night, or the second. I started to feel stupid, like I'd overreacted to something explainable and rare. Light does weird things sometimes. The atmosphere bends it. The brain fills in gaps. On the fourth morning, I woke up before my alarm, heart already beating fast, like my body knew something was coming. I pulled on a jacket and went outside. The horizon was dark. The stars were sharp and steady. I waited, staring so hard my eyes watered. At 4:46 a.m., the glow appeared again. Same place, same color, same soft, even brightness. It outlined the trees exactly the same way, like it was following a template. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The glow lifted. As it rose, I noticed something I hadn't the first time. The stars behind it weren't disappearing the way they would behind a cloud or fog. They were still there, just slightly distorted, like I was looking at them through thick glass. When the glow detached from the horizon completely, my chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a band around it. I had the sudden, strong feeling of being observed. Not watched in a creepy way, more like noticed, the way you notice an insect on a window before deciding whether it matters. The glow reached a point directly above the hills and stopped. For maybe 2 seconds, it just hung there. Then it vanished again, leaving the sky unchanged, untouched. I didn't stay outside for sunrise that time. I went inside and locked the door, even though I hadn't felt afraid in any normal sense. More unsettled than scared, like something had broken a rule I didn't know existed. I started writing down the times, always between 4:46 and 4:48, never on the exact same minute, but close. I checked weather reports. No clouds, no storms, no temperature inversions, nothing unusual. On the sixth morning, I drove out toward the hills after it happened, pulling over on a dirt road where I'd have a clear view. The ground was still dark, frost crunching under my boots. I stared at the spot where the glow had been. Nothing lingered, no warmth, no smell. No sign at all. I stood there longer than I should have, watching the sky lighten naturally, feeling foolish and exposed. That night, I dreamed of standing in the yard again, only the glow didn't lift. It stretched instead, thinning until it was a long, narrow strip of light that cut straight up into the sky, disappearing beyond where I could see. I woke up with my heart racing and the sensation that the room was too small. The glow didn't come back after that week. I still wake up early sometimes, especially when I can't sleep. I sit on the steps and watch the horizon, half hoping, half dreading that pale light will return. It hasn't. But every once in a while, when the sky is perfectly clear and the air is cold and still, I get the sense that dawn is about to break too early again. And for a second, before anything actually happens, the darkness feels thinner, like it's waiting to be pulled away. I was driving home later than usual, a little after midnight, because my shift ran long. I worked maintenance for a distribution warehouse outside of town, and most nights the drive was the same quiet stretch of highway through farmland and low hills. No streetlights, just reflectors and the occasional farmhouse set back far from the road. I liked that part of the drive. It gave my head time to slow down. That night was clear and cold. No clouds, no fog. The sky was dark enough that the stars looked sharp like pinholes. I had the radio low, some talk show I wasn't really listening to, mostly just noise to stay awake. My phone was face down in the cup holder. The car clock read 12:18 a.m. About 10 minutes into the drive, I noticed the sky ahead of me looked wrong. At first, I thought it was just my eyes adjusting after cresting a small hill. The road dipped slightly, and beyond it, the horizon had this faint glow, low and wide like light pollution from a city. The thing was, there wasn't a city out there. The nearest town in that direction was tiny and miles away, and there was nothing beyond it but fields and forest. The glow wasn't orange or yellow like city lights usually are. It was pale, almost gray-white, spread evenly across the sky just above the hills. It reminded me of driving toward a city from far away, when the sky brightens before you ever see buildings. I slowed down without really thinking about it. My headlights washed over the road, the reflectors ticking by, but the glow stayed fixed ahead of me. It didn't get brighter as I approached. It didn't fade either. It just sat there, steady and quiet. I checked my mirrors. Nothing behind me. No other cars on the road. The radio crackled softly, then went quiet for a second. Not static, just silence, like the signal dropped. Then it came back, mid-sentence, like nothing had happened. The glow brightened slightly, enough that the outline of the hills became clearer. I could see the tree line in silhouette. The sky above it looked washed out, like someone had turned down the contrast on reality. I remember thinking very clearly that it felt like driving towards something I wasn't supposed to reach. Then, all at once, the glow vanished. Not fading, not shrinking. It just cut out. The sky snapped back to its normal darkness, stars sharp again, like they'd been uncovered. I blinked a few times, half expecting it to come back. It didn't. The road ahead looked completely normal. Same hills, same trees, same empty stretch of asphalt. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and laughed quietly at myself. Light does weird things. Refraction. Temperature differences. I'd read about that stuff before. I glanced down at the dashboard. The car clock read 12:27 a.m. I frowned and checked my speed. I hadn't been crawling. I'd slowed a little, sure, but not enough to lose track of time. The stretch of road I was on usually took about 12 minutes from where I'd first noticed the glow to the next familiar turn. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no notifications. The time matched the car clock. My stomach tightened in that slow, sinking way you get when something doesn't add up, but you can't explain why. I drove the rest of the way home on autopilot, watching every landmark like it might betray me. The old red barn, the broken fence, the creek that crossed under the road. Everything was where it should be, but it all felt slightly unfamiliar, like a set rebuilt from memory. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light was off, which made sense. I lived alone. The house was dark and quiet. Inside, I stood in the kitchen longer than I needed to, listening to the hum of the fridge, grounding myself in normal sounds. I checked my step count on my phone, out of habit. Nothing weird there. I slept badly. I kept waking up, convinced I'd missed my alarm, heart racing, only to see it was still dark outside. The next night, I drove the same route, same time. Nothing happened. The night after that, same thing. By the end of the week, I'd almost convinced myself it was just exhaustion messing with me. Then Friday came and my shift ran late again. It was 12:16 a.m. when I passed the same hill. The glow was already there. It looked exactly the same color, same shape, same impossible suggestion of a city that didn't exist. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, and I felt that same pull in my chest, like anticipation mixed with dread. This time I didn't slow down. I kept my speed steady, eyes locked on the road, forcing myself not to stare at the sky. The glow stayed in my peripheral vision, unmoving, patient. The radio went silent again. Longer this time. I turned the volume knob. Nothing. No static. Just dead air. The glow brightened just a little. I felt pressure in my ears like when you change altitude too fast. My jaw ached. My thoughts felt sluggish, like they were moving through syrup. Then the glow lifted. It didn't rise like smoke or light normally does. It pulled upward in one smooth motion like a flat sheet being raised. As it moved, the sky behind it looked wrong, slightly warped, as if depth itself was bending. For a second, it felt like the car wasn't moving, even though the road was still sliding under my headlights. Then it was gone. The radio crackled back to life, mid-word. I glanced at the clock, 12:25 a.m. I didn't stop driving. I didn't slow down. I didn't even look back. At home, I checked my mileage. It was higher than it should have been by about 4 miles. The next morning, my neighbor Linda asked if I'd been out late again. She said she'd seen headlights past the end of the road around 12:20. I told her I'd gotten home around then. She shook her head. No, I mean earlier. I was taking the trash out. The headlights were already gone by 20 past. I didn't argue. After that, I started leaving earlier when I could, taking a longer route, even if it added time. The glow never showed up on those roads, but sometimes, late at night when I'm driving somewhere unfamiliar, I catch a faint brightness ahead of me, low on the horizon, and my chest tightens. I check the clock without meaning to. So far, it hasn't happened again. At least not in a way I can prove. The first thing I noticed was the shadow above the bookshelf moving when nothing else was. I was sitting on the couch with my feet up on the coffee table, half watching something I'd already seen, just letting the noise fill the room. It was late, a little after 11, and the house was quiet in that normal way it gets at night when the furnace kicks on and off and everything else settles. One lamp was on in the corner by the window, warm light, nothing harsh. I glanced up because the line where the wall met the ceiling looked wrong. The shadow there, the soft dark band that always sat in the same place, was sliding, slowly, not flickering, not changing shape, just drifting, like someone was gently pulling it along the ceiling toward the hallway. I froze, remote loose in my hand. My first thought was headlights. A car passing by, light hitting the house at a weird angle. But my place sat back from the road, and there were trees between me and the street. Plus, the movement was steady. Too steady. I leaned forward and watched it for a few seconds. The shadow kept moving in the same direction, smooth and deliberate, like it had a destination. I stood up. The second I shifted my weight, I felt that tight, hollow feeling in my chest you get right before something bad happens. The shadow didn't react. It didn't speed up or stop. It just kept going. I walked to the light switch and flipped it on. The ceiling flooded with light, and the shadow snapped back into its normal place instantly, like nothing had happened. I stood there longer than I needed to, listening. The house sounded normal. No footsteps, no creaks out of place. The TV kept playing behind me. I turned the lamp off again. The shadow stayed still. I told myself it was my eyes, or fatigue, or the angle of the lamp. I sat back down, trying to shake the feeling that something had already happened and I'd missed it. About a minute later, the shadows started moving again. This time I could see it wasn't just one. The entire line along the ceiling was drifting together, every shadow sliding in the same direction toward the front of the house. It was subtle, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I stood again, slower this time, careful not to make sudden movements. My skin prickled, like static. I walked to the window. The glass was cold against my fingertips as I pulled the curtain back a few inches. Outside, the neighborhood looked the same as always. Dark houses, a few porch lights, the street empty. But above the rooftops, just above the tree line, there was a faint light moving across the sky. It wasn't bright. It was barely there, like someone had smudged a pale gray glow across the stars and was slowly dragging it sideways. No blinking, no sound. It moved in a perfectly straight line. As it passed overhead, the shadows inside the house kept sliding in the same direction. I stepped back from the window, heart pounding, and looked up at the ceiling again. The shadows were still moving, still smooth, still unbroken. Then everything stopped. The light outside vanished without fading. The shadows froze where they were, then gently slid back to where they belonged, as if released. The silence afterward felt wrong, too complete, like the air had been muted. I stood there for a long time before I realized my jaw hurt from clenching it. I checked my phone, no alerts, no missed calls. The time read 11:24. I could have sworn it had been closer to 11:15 when I first noticed the shadow. I slept with all the lights on that night. The next day, nothing felt off. I went to work, talked to people. The world stayed where it was supposed to be. By the afternoon, the whole thing already felt unreal, like something I'd imagined while half asleep. That night, it happened again. Not the light, just the shadows. I was brushing my teeth when I noticed the line above the bathroom mirror shifting. Same direction, same speed. I didn't even finish brushing. I rinsed, turned on every light in the house, and sat on the couch until I fell asleep, sitting upright. The third night, I didn't see anything. The fourth night, I did. This time, I was ready. I left the lights low on purpose and sat in the living room with the curtains open. I didn't turn the TV on. I just waited. Around 11:30, the shadows started drifting. My heart started racing immediately, but I forced myself to stay still. I counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. Outside, the faint light appeared again, sliding silently across the sky, same path as before. It was clearer this time, wider, close enough that the stars behind it dimmed slightly as it passed. The shadows followed it exactly. I felt pressure build in my ears like altitude change, and a low vibration deep in my chest, more felt than heard. The house itself seemed to hum, just barely. I grabbed my phone and lifted it, pointing the camera at the ceiling. The moment the screen lit up, the vibration stopped. The shadows snapped back. Outside, the light vanished. My phone screen showed nothing but a normal ceiling. I checked the time, 11:47. 17 minutes gone. I didn't sit in the dark again after that. I started leaving lights on overnight, sleeping with the TV running, anything to keep shadows from forming. A week later, my neighbor Mark asked if I'd seen anything strange in the sky lately. He said his dog had been acting weird at night, staring up and whining at the same time every evening. I told him no. I didn't want to explain how the shadows in my house seemed to know where the light was before I did. I still live there. The shadows haven't moved like that again. Not yet. But sometimes late at night, when I'm sitting quietly and the room is dim, I swear I feel the light before it shows up, like a pressure shift or the sense of being slightly out of sync with everything else. When that happens, I don't look up anymore. I turn on every light I can reach and wait for the feeling to pass. I noticed it because the woods went quiet. Not suddenly, like a switch flipping, but gradually enough that my brain registered something was off before I consciously understood what. I was about 10 minutes into my usual walk, the one I took most nights after work, looping through the edge of the neighborhood where the houses thinned out and the trees started crowding the road. It was late, close to midnight. The air was cool, but not cold, that early fall temperature where you don't need a jacket if you keep moving. The sky was clear, no clouds, just stars above the dark line of trees. I walked this route a lot. I knew the sounds, crickets, distant traffic, the hum from the highway miles away. That night, the crickets were still there at first, but they faded as I moved farther from the streetlights. One by one, like someone slowly turning down a volume knob. I stopped walking. The quiet didn't snap back. It stayed thick and pressed in like the air before a storm, except there wasn't a cloud in the sky. That was when I saw the light. It was above the tree line to my left, just barely visible. Not bright, not blinking. A dull, steady glow, like a star that had dropped too low and gotten caught in the branches. It hovered there, unmoving. I stood still, staring at it. I waited for it to blink like a plane or drift like a satellite. It didn't. I took a step forward. The light moved too, not away. Sideways. It slid along the tree line, keeping the same distance from me. Same height, same faint glow. I stopped again. It stopped. My stomach tightened. I laughed quietly, more out of reflex than humor, and shook my head. I told myself it was perspective. Maybe a distant tower light lined up just right. Maybe my angle changed. I started walking again, faster this time. The light kept pace. I glanced down at my phone to check the time. 12:03 a.m. No notifications. No weird compass behavior. When I looked back up, the light was still there, still tracking me. I veered off the path and stepped onto the gravel shoulder of the road, testing it. The light shifted with me, adjusting its position smoothly, like it was locked onto an invisible rail. My breathing got shallow. I could hear my footsteps louder than they should have been, each crunch of gravel echoing too much in the quiet. I broke into a jog. The light matched me perfectly. It didn't bob, it didn't lag, it didn't surge ahead. It just slid through the air above the trees, pacing me like it had all the time in the world. I stopped again, hands on my knees, heart pounding. The light stopped. I tilted my head back, squinting, trying to see any shape around it. There was nothing, no outline, no structure, just a glow, steady and patient. I felt watched, not in a dramatic way, not like something was about to jump out. More like the feeling you get when someone stands too close behind you in a line, quiet and unmoving, close enough that you're aware of their presence without seeing them. I backed up a few steps. The light slid backward too. I turned around slowly, scanning the other side of the road, half expecting to see something there as well. Nothing. Just empty darkness and the faint outline of houses farther back. When I turned back, the light hadn't moved. It was still waiting. I pulled my phone out again, hands shaking now, and opened the camera. I didn't even try to zoom. I just pointed it at the trees and hit record. The screen showed darkness, grainy leaves, no light. I lowered the phone and looked with my eyes. The glow was there, clear as ever. A pressure built in my ears, subtle but uncomfortable, like the start of altitude sickness. The quiet deepened. Even my footsteps sounded muted when I shifted my weight. I made a decision then. I didn't think it through. I just turned around and started walking back toward home, fast but not running. The light followed, same distance, same height, same steady pace. I passed the bend in the road where the trees thinned slightly. Normally from there you could see the glow of the neighborhood streetlights ahead. That night, they seemed dimmer, like someone had turned them down. I sped up, so did the light. Not ahead of me, not behind me, always beside me. I started to run. My breath came hard and loud in my ears, my legs burned, the familiar landmarks blurred past, mailboxes, driveways, the old oak with the split trunk. The light didn't change at all. It didn't chase me. It didn't close in. It just stayed exactly where it had been from the start. When I reached the first streetlight at the edge of the neighborhood, the light above the trees flickered. Just once. Then it vanished. Not faded. Not darted away. Just gone, like someone had turned it off. The crickets came back all at once, loud enough to make me flinch. The pressure in my ears released, leaving behind a faint ringing. I stopped under the streetlight, bent over, gasping for air. My whole body shook, partly from exertion, partly from adrenaline. I checked my phone again. 12:27 a.m. I stared at the time, trying to make sense of it. I hadn't been out there that long. I knew my route. Even with the stops, it shouldn't have taken more than 15 minutes. I walked the rest of the way home without looking at the trees. Inside, everything felt normal. Too normal. The hum of the refrigerator, the clock on the microwave blinking the wrong time because I'd never bothered to set it, my shoes by the door. I locked the door. Then I checked it again. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I told myself it was stress. I'd been working late all week. My sleep schedule was off. The brain does weird things when it's tired. That night, I didn't go for a walk. The night after that, I did. I told myself if I didn't, I'd never know whether it was real or not. I took the same route, same time, same pace. Nothing happened. No quiet, no light, just a normal night. I walked again the next night, and the one after that. A week passed. I started to relax. Then, one night, as I rounded the bend where the trees thickened, I saw it again. Same glow, same height, same distance. Waiting. I stopped immediately. It stopped. We stayed like that for a long time, me standing in the middle of the road, it hovering above the tree line. I didn't run this time. I didn't pull out my phone. I just stood there, breathing, trying to slow my heart. After maybe a minute, the light began to drift. Not away. Up. It rose straight into the sky, slow and smooth, until it blended with the stars and disappeared among them. The crickets never stopped that time. I walked home carefully, scanning the sky the whole way. It's been months since then. I still take walks, but I changed my route. I stick to well-lit streets now. I don't go near the trees after midnight. Sometimes, though, when I'm out late and the sky is clear, I get the feeling I'm being matched again. Not followed exactly, just paced. Like something out there learned my speed once and never forgot it. When that happens, I don't look toward the tree line. I just keep walking and wait until the streetlights come back. I woke up because my chest felt tight. Not pain, not panic, just pressure, like when you're underwater a little too long and your body notices before your brain does. My eyes opened to a dark room, the faint orange glow of the streetlight leaking through the blinds. For a few seconds I lay there, trying to figure out what had pulled me out of sleep. Then I realized the air itself felt wrong. There was a sound outside my window, but calling it a sound didn't quite fit. It was a low hum, steady and flat, like the vibration you feel standing near a large generator or an idling truck. Except it wasn't loud. It barely registered in my ears. I felt it more in my ribs and jaw than anything else. I held my breath. The hum didn't change. I sat up slowly, every movement deliberate, like I might disturb something if I moved too fast. The pressure in my chest increased just a little when I shifted, or as if my body was reacting to the motion rather than the sound. I checked my phone, 2:41 a.m., no notifications, no missed calls, everything normal. The hum stayed constant. No rhythm, no rise or fall, just there. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood. The floor felt solid, familiar. My room looked exactly the same as it always did. Posters crooked on the wall, laundry pile in the corner, the faint clicking sound from the old digital clock on my dresser. I took 2 steps toward the window. The pressure deepened. My ears popped softly, like a change in altitude, even though I was still in my bedroom. I stopped walking. The sensation stayed, but it didn't get worse. That was the first moment I felt truly uneasy. The way the hum didn't react to me, didn't waver or respond, made it feel separate from the world I understood. Like it wasn't interacting with my environment at all. I reached out and twisted the blinds open just enough to see outside. The street was empty. No cars, no people. The streetlight across from my house glowed steadily, its light cutting across the pavement and stopping short of my driveway. The trees lining the road stood still, leaves unmoving in the calm air. Nothing looked out of place. But the hum felt closer now, like it was centered just outside my window, even though I couldn't see anything producing it. I pressed my palm lightly against the glass. It was cool, no vibration, no tremor. My reflection stared back at me, eyes wide, hair flattened from sleep. I looked like someone who had woken up from a bad dream and hadn't realized it yet. I cracked the window open an inch. The pressure surged. Not painfully, but enough that my stomach dropped and my breath caught. The hum didn't get louder. It didn't need to. The sensation pushed inward, filling my chest and sinuses, making my teeth buzz faintly. I closed the window again, heart racing. As soon as the latch clicked shut, the pressure eased slightly. Not gone, just less intense. I backed away from the window and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to slow my breathing. I told myself it was something mechanical, a transformer, construction equipment, some industrial thing I'd never noticed before. Except our neighborhood didn't have anything like that nearby. I listened harder. The hum stayed perfectly even. No Doppler effect, no movement. It didn't drift past like a plane or swell like distant traffic. It felt stationary. I checked the hallway light switch and flicked it on. The soft yellow light filled my room, grounding me a little. The hum didn't change. I stepped into the hallway. My apartment was quiet, too quiet. The fridge usually kicked on every so often. The pipes made noise. The building settled and creaked. None of that was happening. I walked to the living room and stood near the front door. The hum felt weaker there, but still present, like the edge of a field I didn't want to step deeper into. I glanced at the front window. The night outside looked thinner. That was the only word that came to mind. Like the darkness wasn't as deep as it should have been, even though there were fewer lights on than usual. I reached for my phone again and opened the weather app, half expecting to see a storm warning or something strange. Clear skies, no wind. The hum cut off instantly, not faded, not tapered, just stopped. The sudden absence was worse. My ears rang sharply, a high, thin sound that made me wince. The pressure vanished at the same moment, leaving behind a hollow feeling, like the air had been sucked out of the room and rushed back in too fast. I stood there, frozen, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did, but the quiet that replaced the hum wasn't normal quiet. It felt staged, artificial, like when you pause a movie and the background noise drops out completely. I listened for the fridge. Nothing. I listened for distant traffic. Nothing. Even my own breathing sounded muffled, like my head was wrapped in cotton. I moved again, slowly, testing the space. Each step felt slightly delayed, like my body was catching up to itself. I went back to the bedroom window and pulled the blinds all the way open. Outside, the sky looked wrong. Not dramatically wrong, just subtly off. The stars seemed dimmer directly above my building, like someone had brushed a thin layer of haze across that patch of sky alone. The edges of the haze were soft, uneven. I leaned closer to the glass, scanning the tree line at the far end of the street. That was when I saw the light move. It wasn't bright, barely brighter than the sky itself. A pale, diffuse glow slid slowly behind the tops of the trees, smooth and steady, like it was gliding along an invisible track. No beam, no reflection, no sound. It moved for maybe 3 seconds, then it slipped behind the taller trees and vanished. As soon as it disappeared, the night snapped back to normal. The fridge kicked on with a familiar hum. A car passed somewhere in the distance. Crickets resumed their uneven chorus. The ringing in my ears faded. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty street, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. I didn't sleep much after that. Every small noise made me tense. Every shift of light outside pulled my attention back to the window. In the morning, everything looked ordinary. My neighbor Mark waved at me while loading his car. Mrs. Alvarez from across the street walked her dog. The sky was blue and clear. I almost convinced myself it hadn't been real. Almost. That night, I asked Mark if he'd noticed anything strange overnight. Power issues. Noise. Anything. He shook his head and laughed, said he slept like a rock. The next night, I slept with the blinds open. I woke up at 2:41 a.m. on the dot. No hum, no pressure, just normal darkness and the sound of my own breathing. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. Some nights now, when everything is quiet and the air feels a little too still, I catch myself holding my breath, waiting for that pressure to return, waiting to see if the night empties itself again. I was lying on a lawn chair in my backyard watching the clouds drift by. It was late afternoon, that slow part of the day when the sun isn't harsh anymore, but it's not evening yet. The air was warm and still, no breeze. I'd gotten home early from work because the shop closed unexpectedly, some issue with the internet, I think, and I didn't feel like going back inside. So I dragged the old chair out onto the grass, cracked open a soda, and just stared up. I'd grown up doing that. Watching clouds slide past, trying to see shapes. It was one of the few things that still shut my brain off. At first, everything looked normal. Thin white clouds stretched across the sky, moving slowly from west to east. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady. I remember thinking it might rain later because the sky had that hazy look to it, like the blue was washed out. I checked my phone at some point, 4:38 p.m. No notifications, no missed calls, nothing urgent. I set the phone on my chest and kept watching. That's when I noticed one of the clouds wasn't moving. It took a while to register because everything else was. Your brain expects consistency, I guess. But after maybe a minute of watching, I realized the cloud directly above me hadn't shifted at all. The others were slowly sliding past it, thinning and stretching as they went, but this one patch stayed locked in place. It wasn't shaped like a normal cloud either. It was rounder, softer around the edges, almost like a smudge someone had rubbed into the sky. I sat up slightly, squinting. I told myself it was probably higher up than the others, or lower, some optical thing. I'd read enough random science articles to know clouds could do weird stuff depending on altitude. Still, it bothered me. I watched it for another minute, then another. It didn't move. I got out of the chair and stood up, craning my neck back. The sun was off to the side, the knot in my eyes. I had a clear view. The cloud stayed perfectly still. I looked around, half expecting to see something on the ground that lined up with it. A radio tower, maybe, or a plane leaving a contrail that made it look anchored. There was nothing. Just my yard, the fence, my neighbor's shed, and the tree line beyond. When I looked back up, the cloud was still there. That was when the light appeared. At first, it was so faint I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. A subtle brightening, right in the center of the cloud, like someone had turned up a dimmer switch just a notch. I held my breath without realizing it. The glow didn't spread outward, it stayed contained, a soft, milky brightness that didn't cast rays or shine through the edges. The cloud didn't thin or change shape, it just held the light. I waited for thunder, for a flash, for anything that would make it make sense. Nothing happened. The glow slowly intensified, not bright, but noticeable enough that I was certain I wasn't imagining it anymore. The surrounding sky didn't change. No reflections, no flicker, just that one cloud, glowing quietly from within. I felt this weird pressure in my ears, like when you're in an elevator that's moving too fast. Not painful, just uncomfortable enough to notice. I checked the time again, 4:41 p.m. Only 3 minutes had passed, but it felt longer. I thought about calling someone. My sister, maybe, or my neighbor across the fence, Carl, but I couldn't bring myself to look away, even for a second. I had this strong, irrational feeling that if I did, it would stop, like it was contingent on being watched. The glow peaked and held for a moment, then it began to fade. Not suddenly. Slowly, like a candle being lowered into water. The brightness dimmed, receded inward, and vanished completely. The cloud returned to the same dull white it had been before. For a split second, nothing changed. Then the cloud started moving again. It slid eastward at the same speed as the others, blending back into the pattern like it had never stopped. The pressure in my ears disappeared. The sky looked normal. Too normal. I stood there, neck aching, heart thudding, trying to figure out what I'd just seen. A plane passed high overhead a minute later, leaving a faint contrail. I watched it carefully, almost suspiciously. It behaved exactly how it should. I went back inside and sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at nothing. My soda had gone warm. I didn't finish it. That night, I told myself it was probably sunlight hitting ice crystals, or some rare atmospheric thing I didn't understand. There were explanations for everything, right? But over the next few days, small things started bothering me. My phone battery drained faster than usual, even when I wasn't using it. My dog, Milo, kept stopping in the yard and staring up at the same patch of sky, tail low, ears back. Once he growled softly, which he never did unless someone was at the fence. On the third night after it happened, I woke up around 3 a.m. for no reason. The house was quiet, but not in the normal way. The refrigerator wasn't running. The usual hum from the neighborhood was gone. I lay there, listening. There was no sound, but I felt that same subtle pressure in my ears, the same sense of stillness. I didn't get up. I didn't look out the window. The pressure faded after a while. I must have fallen asleep again because the next thing I knew, my alarm was going off. Nothing else happened after that. Not like the cloud anyway. But sometimes when I'm outside and the sky is calm, I catch myself scanning for patches that don't move, watching for that soft internal glow, and every now and then, I get this feeling that whatever it was didn't just pass by, that it stopped, that it noticed. I was standing in the middle of a hayfield when it happened. It was just after midnight, late summer, the kind of night that stays warm even after the sun's been gone for hours. I lived outside a small town in eastern Colorado then, renting a little farmhouse that sat alone between two long stretches of farmland. No close neighbors, no streetlights, No noise except insects and the occasional truck miles away on the highway. I'd gone outside because I couldn't sleep. That wasn't unusual. I worked irregular hours at a grain elevator, and my sleep schedule was wrecked most weeks. When I couldn't shut my brain off, I'd step outside and look at the sky. Out there, the stars were ridiculous. So many of them, it almost looked fake. I walked past the barn and into the field behind the house, stopping about 50 yards out where the grass had been cut low. The ground still smelled like hay and dust. I leaned back, hands on my hips, staring straight up. Everything looked normal at first. The Milky Way was faint but visible, a pale smear cutting across the sky. A few satellites crept along if you watched long enough. I remember spotting one and tracking it just out of habit until it disappeared near the horizon. I checked my phone. 12:17 a.m. No signal, as usual. I stuck it back in my pocket. That's when the stars started to blur. It wasn't sudden. At first, it looked like my eyes were having trouble focusing, like when you've been staring at one spot too long and everything goes soft. I blinked hard a few times and rubbed one eye with the heel of my hand. It didn't fix it. The stars were still there, but their edges smeared slightly, stretching just enough to look wrong. Not streaking, not moving, just unfocused. Like the sky had depth for a second, and my eyes couldn't decide where to lock in. I tilted my head, then turned slowly in a circle, keeping my eyes on the sky. The blur stayed consistent overhead, no matter which direction I faced. The horizon looked fine. The barn roof looked sharp. The trees along the fence line were clear. Only the stars were affected. I remember a weird thought crossing my mind. This is what a camera sees when it's adjusting. That thought made my stomach tighten. The insects stopped. I didn't notice it right away, not consciously, but there was a sudden absence that made the night feel hollow. No crickets, no buzzing, no wind through the grass, just dead, empty quiet. I held my breath without meaning to. The blur intensified. Not dramatically, but enough that I couldn't pick out constellations anymore. The stars looked like tiny white fingerprints smeared across black glass. I whispered something, I don't even remember what, just to hear my own voice. It sounded wrong, too loud, like the air wasn't absorbing sound the way it should. Then everything snapped back, instantly, no transition. One moment the sky was wrong, the next it was razor sharp again, every star in place. The Milky Way crisp, depth gone. At the same time, the night sounds rushed back in like someone had opened a door. Crickets, wind, a distant engine somewhere far off. I gasped, realizing I hadn't been breathing properly. I stood there for a long time, heart pounding, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. I checked my phone again. 12:28 a.m. 11 minutes had passed. I knew that couldn't be right. I hadn't stood there that long. The blur itself couldn't have lasted more than a few seconds. A minute, maybe. I tried to reconstruct the moment in my head, but it felt slippery, like recalling a dream right after waking up. I walked back toward the house, suddenly very aware of how alone I was. Halfway there, I turned around, expecting, hoping to see something in the field. A light, a shape, anything that would explain the time. The field was empty. Over the next few days, little things felt off. I overslept twice, which I never did. Once, I woke up standing in the shower with the water running cold, no memory of getting in. Another morning, I found dirt on my boots, even though I hadn't worn them since the previous afternoon. I told myself it was stress, lack of sleep. That happens. But then Mark saw me. Mark lived a mile down the road, closer to the highway. We'd known each other since high school, and he sometimes stopped by after late shifts to have a beer on my porch. 2 nights after the field incident, he pulled up around 1 a.m. I answered the door half asleep. He looked at me strangely and said, "Man, you okay?" I asked what he meant. "I drove past your place about midnight," he said. "You were out in the field." I laughed and told him he was mistaken. "I'm not," he said. "You were just standing there, not moving. I flashed my headlights, but you didn't react." My mouth went dry. I asked him what time exactly. "A couple minutes after 12, he said. I remember because the radio host was doing that stupid midnight shout-out thing. I didn't tell him about the sky. I just shrugged and said I couldn't sleep. That night, I didn't go outside. A week passed. Nothing else happened. The nights felt normal again. The sky behaved itself. Eventually, I convinced myself it had been some kind of temporary vision issue. Maybe blood pressure. Maybe dehydration. People black out and don't realize it. Then, about a month later, I was back out in the field again. This time, it was early morning, just before dawn. I'd woken up restless and stepped outside without thinking. The horizon was starting to lighten, the stars fading slowly. I stood in almost the same spot as before. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, for just a split second, the stars didn't fade with the dawn. They stayed bright, sharp, fully visible against a sky that should have been washing them out. It was like two images overlapped and hadn't synced yet. I felt that same pressure in my ears, that same hollow quiet. Then the light caught up. The stars dimmed properly. The world continued. I went back inside and sat on the floor until the sun came up. I moved out of that house a few months later for unrelated reasons. New job, new town. I still look at the sky when I can, still track satellites, still notice things most people don't bother with. But sometimes, when the night is very clear, I get the feeling that clarity itself is temporary. Like focus is something applied, not guaranteed. Like whatever keeps things sharp can slip just for a moment. And if you happen to be looking up when it does, you notice. My phone dropped from 62% to 9% in the time it took me to notice the signal bars disappear. I was standing at the end of my driveway, 1 foot on the curb, trying to decide if I had the energy to go for a walk or if I was just pacing because I didn't want to go back inside yet. It was late evening, that stretch of time right after sunset where the sky still held a dull blue color, but the streetlights had already come on. Warm out, no wind, the kind of quiet weekday night where everyone's inside but not asleep yet. I remember glancing at my phone because I was waiting on a text. No service, not even emergency calls. That wasn't normal. I lived in a suburban area outside Fort Collins, not remote at all. Bad reception happened sometimes inside, but never standing outside with a clear view of the sky. Before I could think much about it, the battery icon flickered and dropped again. 9 to 7, then 5. I felt a sudden sharp unease. Phones don't do that. Not like that. No overheating warning, no apps running. I'd charged it an hour earlier. I tilted the phone, tapped the screen, half expecting it to shut off in my hand. Instead, it stayed on, draining visibly, like someone was pulling power straight out of it. That was when the light moved. It wasn't bright. That's the thing people always get wrong. It wasn't a beam or a flash or anything dramatic. It was pale, almost washed out, like the color of fog reflecting a distant porch light. It slid into view above the houses across the street, just over the rooftops, moving slow and steady. No blinking, no sound. I forgot about my phone immediately. The light drifted from left to right, low in the sky, maybe as high as a helicopter would be, but flatter somehow. It didn't cast shadows. It didn't reflect off windows. It was just there, like something slightly brighter than the air around it. I stepped off the curb without realizing it, standing in the street. The neighborhood felt wrong all of a sudden, too still. I became aware that I couldn't hear the usual background noise. No distant traffic, no dogs, no hum from the highway a few miles out. Even the streetlight above me wasn't buzzing the way it normally did. I raised my phone, intending to record. The screen went black. Dead. I stood there, arm half raised, staring up at the light as it continued drifting. It didn't change speed, didn't react to me. It moved like it was following a path that had nothing to do with the ground below. I remember thinking very clearly that if it was some kind of aircraft, I should hear something by now. Even drones made noise. Even planes at altitude left a sound if the air was quiet enough. This thing was silent. As it passed over the house across from mine, I noticed something else that made my stomach drop. It wasn't perfectly round. The edges weren't sharp, but there was a slight unevenness to it, like a smudge that hadn't been wiped clean. The light slowed, not by much, just enough that I noticed. My chest tightened. I suddenly felt very exposed, standing in the open street with no phone, no idea what was happening. I glanced around, expecting porch lights to flip on, doors to open, someone else to be watching. Nothing. Every house was dark. Curtains drawn, cars parked, no movement. The light hovered for maybe 2 seconds, maybe less. It's hard to say. Time felt stretched, like everything was happening through a layer of syrup. Then it drifted upward, straight up, no arc, no curve, just a smooth vertical movement accelerating slightly as it went. It faded as it rose, thinning until it looked like a trick of the eye, then vanished completely. The moment it disappeared, sound rushed back in. I heard a car drive past somewhere nearby. A dog barked. The streetlight above me buzzed loudly enough to make me flinch. I realized I'd been holding my breath and let it out all at once, hands shaking. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty sky. Eventually, I went back inside. My phone wouldn't turn on. I plugged it in, watched the charging symbol appear, then vanish. After a few minutes, it powered up at 1% battery, still showing no signal. It stayed like that for nearly an hour before bars slowly reappeared. No notifications, no missed messages, no system warnings. The battery graph showed a steep drop at exactly 9:41 p.m. I didn't sleep much that night. Over the next few days, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a cell tower issue combined with a battery glitch. Maybe the light was some kind of experimental aircraft or atmospheric effect. I Googled everything I could think of. Satellites, military exercises, ball lightning. Nothing fit cleanly. What bothered me most wasn't the light itself. It was how coordinated everything felt. The signal loss, the battery drain, the silence. Like multiple systems had been affected at once, not randomly, but together. A week later, I was talking to my neighbor Elaine while we both checked our mail. Casual conversation, weather, yard stuff. She paused suddenly and asked, "Hey, did you notice your phone acting weird the other night? Last Tuesday?" My heart skipped. I asked her what she meant. She said her phone had died out of nowhere while she was sitting on her couch. Full battery to nothing. She laughed it off, said she thought it was just old. Then she added, "I could have sworn the sky looked brighter than it should have been for a second, like light pollution, but wrong." I didn't tell her what I saw. I just nodded and said phones were junk these days. Since then, I've had smaller things happen. My phone battery draining faster than usual on clear nights. Signal dropping briefly when the sky is cloudless. Once, I noticed a pale glow reflected faintly in my window, but when I looked outside, there was nothing there. I still stand in my driveway sometimes around dusk, pretending I'm just getting fresh air. I keep my phone charged now. I keep it in my pocket, and every time the signal bars flicker, even for a second, I look up first instead of down. The power went out while I was rinsing a plate at the kitchen sink. Everything shut off at once. Lights, fridge, the low hum of the dishwasher I'd forgotten to start. The house dropped into that sudden hollow quiet that only happens when electricity cuts. Outside, the streetlights went dark too, one after another, like someone flipping switches down the block. I stood there with my hands still wet, listening. No thunder, no wind. The weather had been calm all evening, warm for early fall. I waited for the usual sounds to come back, a neighbor's generator, a car alarm, someone yelling, but nothing happened. I dried my hands on my shirt and walked to the front window. The neighborhood looked wrong without light. Houses blended into each other, dark shapes stacked along the street. The sky was clear, stars faint but visible. No moon. I could see all the way down the block, farther than usual, because there was nothing glowing to break it up. I figured it was just a grid issue. It happened once or twice a year. I stepped onto the porch to check if anyone else was outside. That's when the light appeared. It started at the far end of the street, low and narrow, like a flashlight beam stretched too thin. It slid slowly across the rooftops, not sweeping wide like someone scanning, but moving in a straight, deliberate line. The light itself was pale, almost colorless. Not white exactly, more like a washed-out gray. It didn't flicker. It didn't illuminate anything the way light normally does. Roof shingles didn't brighten. Windows didn't reflect it. The light just existed on top of things, like a projection that forgot how shadows worked. I froze halfway down the porch steps. The beam moved house to house, passing over chimneys, antenna, tree branches. When it crossed leaves, they didn't glow or cast shadows. They just stayed dark, like the light wasn't really touching them. I remember thinking, very calmly, that this wasn't a spotlight. Helicopters used spotlights sometimes, especially near the highway a few miles east, but those were loud and harsh and bright enough to hurt your eyes. This thing made no sound at all. No rotors, no engine, no wind. The beam reached the house across the street and slid over the roofline. I waited for it to reach me. It didn't. It stopped short, hovering just before my side of the street. hung there for a second, perfectly still. I could see the edges of it more clearly then, soft, slightly uneven, like fog being held in shape. My chest tightened. I became very aware of how exposed I was standing there, barefoot on my porch, the rest of the neighborhood dark and silent. Then the beam moved again. It lifted slightly and drifted sideways, cutting across the backyards behind the houses instead of the street. It passed over fences and sheds, moving at the same slow pace, like it was following something invisible. I turned my head to track it and noticed something else that made my stomach drop. No one else was reacting. No doors opening. No voices. No phones lighting up. It was like the entire neighborhood was empty, except for me. The light continued its path, reaching the tree line behind the houses. As it crossed the taller trees, I expected it to scatter or break up. It didn't. It stayed intact, gliding over the canopy, still not casting shadows, still silent. I stepped off the porch without realizing it, standing on the sidewalk. That was when the sound disappeared. I hadn't noticed it until it was gone, but the usual night noises, insects, distant traffic, the faint hiss of wind, all cut out at once. The silence felt thick, like pressure in my ears. The beam paused again, just above the trees. I felt an urge to wave, to shout, to do something that would prove I was real and awake. I didn't. I stood there with my hands curled into fists, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The beam slid upward and thinned, fading as it rose until it was gone entirely. The moment it vanished, sound rushed back. Crickets started up all at once, loud and uneven. Somewhere a dog barked. I heard a car engine turn over a few streets away. I realized I was breathing fast and forced myself to slow down. I went back inside and locked the door, even though I knew that was pointless. I stood in the dark living room, listening, half expecting the light to reappear through the windows. It didn't. About 10 minutes later, the power came back on. Lights flicked on throughout the house. The fridge hummed. The street lights outside glowed to life like nothing had happened. I stood there until my eyes adjusted, trying to convince myself it had been a trick of darkness and nerves. The next morning, I walked down the block and asked my neighbor Tom if he'd noticed the outage. He said, yeah. His power went out for a bit. Asked if mine was back on too. I asked if he'd been outside. He said no. He'd been watching TV when it shut off and just waited it out. I asked if he'd seen anything strange. Lights. Movement. Anything. He shook his head and laughed. Said I watched too much late-night stuff. Over the next few days, I paid attention to small things. How the shadows fell in my yard. How quiet it got at night. I checked the news, neighborhood forums, utility reports. The outage was logged as temporary fault. No details. I didn't mention the beam to anyone else. A week later, I was out back taking the trash to the alley just after sunset when I noticed the roof lines again. I stood there longer than I needed to, watching the dark settle. Nothing happened. But now, whenever the power flickers, even for a second, I feel that same pressure in my ears, and I always look at the rooftops first, waiting to see if the light comes back to finish whatever it was doing. I was driving west on Route 26, the long, empty stretch that cuts through scrub and low hills before the land flattens out. It was late, not quite night yet, but the sun was gone and the sky had that deep blue color that makes everything feel farther away than it is. The weather was clear and still. No wind. The kind of quiet that makes you notice every sound your car makes. I'd been on the road for a couple of hours, coming back from visiting my sister, and I was tired in that dull, floaty way where your thoughts start to wander. I turned the radio on mostly to stay awake. There wasn't much on. A country station faded in and out, then static, then nothing. I didn't bother fixing it. I let it scan. That was when I noticed the sound. Between stations, instead of just static, there was a faint tone. Not loud, not sharp. It came in pulses, steady and even, like a slow electronic heartbeat. It wasn't music, no melody, just a soft repeating at the same interval. At first, I thought it was something wrong with the speakers. I tapped the dash with my knuckles. The tone didn't change. I adjusted the volume. It got louder and quieter, but the rhythm stayed perfect. I glanced at the display. The radio was still scanning, sliding through empty frequencies, but the tone stayed there, sitting underneath everything else. When a station briefly came in, the tone dropped out. As soon as it faded, The tone returned. I remember thinking it sounded intentional, like it was being broadcast on purpose but not meant to be heard directly. The road was empty in both directions. No headlights ahead, none behind. Just my car cutting through the dark. After a few minutes, I started to feel irritated by it. The repetition got under my skin. I reached to turn the radio off, then stopped. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe, or that quiet sense that if I interrupted it, I'd miss something. I kept driving. The land opened up on the right side, where the hills dropped away into a wide basin. I could see miles out there. The horizon was a clean line, dark earth against darker sky. That's when I noticed the light. It was far away, low and faint, sitting just above the horizon. At first, I thought it was a town. There were a few small ones out that way, but this light wasn't spread out. It was a single glow, soft-edged and steady, like a distant dome. It didn't flicker. It didn't move. It just sat there. The tone on the radio continued, perfectly in time. I checked my mirrors. Still no cars. I looked at my phone on the passenger seat. No signal. That wasn't unusual out there, but I remember noticing it anyway. As I drove, the light slowly lowered, not like it was setting, more like it was sinking. The horizon didn't change. The light did. The tone on the radio began to feel louder, even though I hadn't touched the volume. I could feel it more than hear it, a gentle vibration through the steering wheel and the seat. It wasn't unpleasant, just noticeable. I tried to time it. The pulse matched nothing I recognized. Not my turn signal. Not the engine. It was its own thing. I told myself it was a radio tower and atmospheric interference. I said it out loud, just to hear a human voice. The words sounded thin in the car. The light continued to sink. I realized then that I'd passed the turnoff I usually used. The reflective sign was a mile back, barely visible in my rearview mirror. I didn't remember seeing it at all. That bothered me more than the light. I slowed down slightly, heart starting to pick up, and watched the glow. As it dropped closer to the horizon, the tone on the radio stretched out. The rhythm stayed the same, but each pulse seemed to linger longer, like it was dragging. My ears felt full, like when you change elevation too fast. The light reached the horizon and paused. Half of it was gone now, like it was being swallowed by the land. The remaining half dimmed but didn't change shape. The tone stopped, not faded, not cut off, just stopped mid-pulse. The sudden silence was so complete that I flinched. The radio was still on, still scanning, but now it was just static and empty air. A second later, the light slipped fully below the horizon and vanished. I pulled over without really deciding to. The car rolled onto the shoulder and I shut off the engine. The quiet pressed in immediately. No insects, no wind, no distant highway noise. It felt like everything had taken a step back. I sat there with my hands on the wheel, listening to my own breathing. After maybe 30 seconds, sound returned in pieces. A faint breeze, the ticking of the cooling engine. Somewhere far off, a low rumble that might have been another car miles away. I turned the radio off completely. I stayed there for a while, staring at the horizon, waiting for the light to come back. It didn't. The sky darkened normally, stars starting to show. When I finally drove again, I was more alert than I'd been all night. I didn't miss any more signs. The turnoff appeared where it should, bright and obvious, like it always was. I got home without incident. The next morning, I checked the car. The radio worked fine. No weird sounds. No memory of the tone saved anywhere. I drove back the same route a week later during the day. Nothing unusual. Just scrub and sky. I didn't tell my sister about it. I didn't write it down right away. I kept thinking I'd remember it wrong if I waited too long. Sometimes now, when I'm driving late and the radio scans between stations, I hold my breath for a second, just to see if that rhythm comes back. Every cow in the field was facing the exact same spot in the sky. I noticed it because it was weird enough to pull my eyes off the road, and that doesn't usually happen out there. I was driving a 2-lane highway through central Iowa, the kind that cuts straight through miles of farmland with nothing but corn, soybeans, and the occasional farmhouse set way back from the road. It was late evening, just past dusk. The sun had dropped, but the sky still held some light, that flat gray blue that makes everything feel suspended. I was heading back home from visiting my sister. It was about a 2-hour drive, and I'd taken this route more times than I could count. There was nothing new or interesting about it, which is probably why the cows stood out so much. There were maybe 30 of them in the field on my right. Big black shapes against the pale grass. They weren't grazing, they weren't moving at all. Every single one had its head raised, with its neck stretched slightly, all facing the same direction. At first, I thought maybe a truck or a train was passing somewhere out of view. Sometimes livestock react to that, but there was no sound, no headlights, no rumble. I slowed down without really deciding to, just eased my foot off the gas. The cows didn't react to my car, not even a flick of an ear. They were completely focused on whatever they were looking at. I followed their line of sight. Above the field, maybe a few hundred feet up, there was a faint glow. It wasn't bright. If I hadn't already been looking that way, I might have missed it entirely. It looked like a patch of air that was slightly lighter than the rest of the sky, like someone had smudged chalk into the clouds even though there weren't any clouds there. The glow didn't move. It didn't pulse. It just hung there. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, gravel crunching loud in the quiet, and put the car in park. My headlights swept across the field, and still the cows didn't move. That was when my stomach tightened. Animals don't usually ignore sudden light and sound like that, especially not all of them at once. I rolled the window down halfway. The air smelled like cut grass and manure, normal for that area. I listened for insects, for wind, for anything. It was quiet, not dead silent, but muted, like the sound was being absorbed before it reached me. The glow remained. I checked my phone. No service, which wasn't unusual out there, but the signal bars were completely gone. Not even the no service text, just nothing. I looked back up. The glow seemed slightly more defined now, not brighter, just more distinct from the surrounding sky. The edges were still soft, but I could tell exactly where it was. One of the cows shifted its weight. That tiny movement made my heart jump, like I'd been waiting for proof that time was still working normally. Then, all at once, every cow took a single step forward. Not a stampede, not panic, just one synchronized step like they'd been cued. I felt cold along my arms and neck. "Okay," I said out loud to no one. My voice sounded too loud in the car. The glow dimmed slightly. For a second, I thought it was fading, and I felt an unexpected wave of disappointment mixed with relief. But instead of disappearing, it changed shape. Not dramatically, it stretched like something turning sideways. The glow became thinner, longer, angled slightly toward the horizon. Still silent. Still no movement from the cows beyond that single step. My ears popped gently, like when you go up a hill too fast. I swallowed and felt pressure shift behind my eyes. The glow vanished. Not faded. Vanished. One moment it was there, the next it wasn't. At the exact same time, the cows exploded into motion. They started lowing loudly, some turning in circles, others breaking into a run toward the far end of the field. A few dropped their heads and started grazing again like nothing had happened. Sound rushed back into the world all at once. Crickets. Distant traffic. Wind through corn. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, breathing harder than I realized I'd been. I waited for something else to happen. Nothing did. After a minute or two, I started the car again and pulled back onto the road. My hands shook enough that I noticed it when I reached for the gear shift. The rest of the drive home passed without incident, but I couldn't stop replaying what I'd seen. I kept trying to rationalize it. Drones, military aircraft, atmospheric phenomenon, anything, but nothing explained the cows. The next morning, I drove past the same field in daylight. Everything looked normal. The cows were scattered, grazing lazily, swishing their tails. No marks in the grass. No signs of disturbance. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Almost. A week later, I was driving that route again, this time earlier in the evening. Full daylight, blue sky. I told myself I wouldn't look at the fields. I did anyway. Different field this time. Different cows, same behavior, every single one facing the same point in the sky. My heart started racing before I even found the glow. It was there, faint but unmistakable, higher than before. Barely visible against the blue, like a distortion more than a light. I didn't pull over this time. I slowed down, craning my neck as safely as I could. The glow moved. Not fast. Just a smooth lateral drift, like it was sliding along an invisible track. The cows turned their heads to follow it, perfectly synchronized, bodies still. I felt sick. A pickup truck passed me going the other direction, the driver oblivious. I wanted to flash my lights to get someone else to look, but I didn't. The glow winked out again. The cows resumed grazing like nothing had happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that field, all those animals locked onto something I couldn't properly see. I started paying attention after that. Anytime I drove through farmland, I checked the livestock. Most of the time they behaved normally, but not always. Once, I saw a herd of horses pressed up against a fence, all staring at the same empty patch of sky just before a storm rolled in, except the storm didn't come. Another time, goats on a hillside stood frozen for several minutes, ears angled forward before bolting downhill for no clear reason. I never saw the glow again as clearly as that first night. Just hints, brief distortions, a sense that the sky wasn't as empty as it looked. I tried talking about it once, casually, with a guy at work who grew up on a farm. He laughed and said, "Animals spook easy." I didn't push it. Now, when I drive those roads at dusk, I keep my eyes forward. If I do glance at the fields and see cattle standing still, heads raised, I don't slow down anymore. I don't want to know what they're watching, because whatever it was, it never seemed interested in me, and that feels worse. I noticed something was wrong with Milo before I noticed anything in the sky. He'd been walking normally, sniffing trees, pulling toward every mailbox like it held state secrets, when he suddenly locked up. One second he was trotting ahead on the leash, the next he froze so abruptly I nearly stepped on him. It was a quiet night, colder than it looked. Early November in our suburb outside Eugene always had that damp chill, but this felt different, like the cold had weight. Streetlights cast dull yellow pools on the sidewalk, and everything in between was dark enough that I could barely see my breath. "Milo," I said, giving the leash a gentle tug. "Come on." He didn't budge. His ears weren't perked. His tail wasn't wagging or tucked. He was just fixed. Head angled up, body rigid, front paws planted stubbornly. The leash shook slightly in my hand because he was trembling. Not scared trembling, but something sharper, like he was bracing against a sound I couldn't hear. I followed his gaze. At first, I didn't see anything except the usual smattering of stars and a couple of faint clouds drifting overhead, but Milo kept staring, so I kept looking. Then I saw it. A shadow. A shape moving across the sky, not blocking stars outright, but dimming them, like someone pulling sheer fabric across a flashlight. It glided so slowly I thought maybe my eyes were tricking me, like I was imagining movement where there wasn't any. The shape had no lights, no outline, just a faint distortion, a dark patch against the night that drifted silently from west to east. I squinted. The stars behind it didn't disappear. They warped, shifted slightly, like their positions were bending through a lens. The shadow was the size of a plane, maybe bigger, but it didn't move like one. No noise, no blinking lights, no change in speed, just a smooth, steady glide. Milo whimpered softly. I'd never heard that exact sound from him before, not fear, not alertness, more like acknowledgement. I swallowed and took a step backward without meaning to. My shoe scraped against the pavement, unnaturally loud in the stillness. The shadow didn't react. It kept drifting. But the air around us changed. Not colder, not warmer. Just pushed, like a small, silent shift in pressure. My ears tingled. Milo pressed himself against my leg, still staring up. "Okay," I said quietly. "Okay, buddy." I wasn't saying it to him. The shadow slid over a break in the trees where the sky opened wider. Without the branches interrupting it, I could see it more clearly. Not a craft, not a bird, not a cloud. It was a moving absence, an oval or maybe elongated shape with edges so soft they blurred into the night. The stars at its center dimmed, but didn't vanish, like something transparent but dense was passing over them. The subtle warping reminded me of heat rising off pavement, but frozen, cold, controlled. A wind stirred behind me, though the leaves across the street stayed still. It was the wrong direction, the wrong temperature, and lasted too long to be natural. Milo leaned harder into me, nails clicking on the sidewalk. The shape passed almost directly overhead. Everything got quieter. No distant traffic, no hum of porch lights, no rustling leaves. The silence thickened until I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then the dogs in the neighborhood started barking, not all at once, just one at first, far away. Then another, then two more. The barks overlapped, scattered across blocks, not panicked but insistent. Animals warning each other in a way humans never quite pick up on. Milo didn't bark. He just watched. The shadow started to rise, not abruptly, but gradually, like it was losing interest in the ground. It drifted higher, and as it did, the stars behind it straightened, the distortion eased, the pressure in my ears faded, but the shape didn't get smaller like something flying away. It just thinned. The darkness softened. The space it occupied dissolved into the rest of the sky until there was nothing left to track. The barking in the neighborhood faded one by one. Milo finally blinked, then shook himself from head to tail like he'd just come out of cold water. He looked at me, eyes wide, waiting for me to do something. I didn't know what that something was. "Let's go home," I said, barely over a whisper. He didn't hesitate. He turned and pulled hard on the leash, eager to get moving again. We walked fast. Too fast. I kept checking the sky, even though I couldn't see much between the trees. Every shadow felt deeper. Every porch light hum felt too sharp. Every quiet stretch of sidewalk felt like it was waiting.